Thank you. Good evening. This is Frank Herbert. Welcome to the June 17th, 2020 meeting of the Township of Hillsborough Board of Adjustment meeting. Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting will be conducted electronically. The public will be given an opportunity to participate in the meeting by phoning the following AT&T call-in bridge number, USA toll-free, 1-888-204-5987. and given the access code 260-4706. Users will be prompted with additional information to join the meeting. All documents pertaining to any applications on the agenda are available on the Township website at hillsboroughNJ.civicClerk.com/web/home.aspx at least 10 days prior to this meeting. Board members, staff, and consultants will be participating remotely. The following staff members and support personnel will be present in the courtroom. Patrick Gorman, our zoning officer, and Fred Kinsler of the IT staff. Applicants will be presenting remotely and will identify themselves before testifying. I might add at this point, anybody in the public grid that hasn't been able to get to the document, we'll get back to you in a few moments and help you with that. Okay. This meeting has been duly advertised according to Section 5 of the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, Public Law 1975, the Sunshine Law. Notice of the 2020 annual meeting schedule has been provided by the officially designated newspapers, the Township Clerk, and posted on the bulletin board at the Hillsborough Township Municipal Complex. Roll call, please, for attendance.
Mr. Valchek?
Here.
Mr. Zarate? Absent. Ms. Erickson? Here. Mr. Sandler?
Here.
Ms. Haynes? Here. Mr. Lilly? Here. Chairman Herbert?
Here.
Mr. Walmacher?
Here.
Mr. Basil? Absent.
Okay, this evening we have no meeting minutes to consider. We have no resolutions to consider this evening. Board of Adjustment business. Patrick, do you have any news on anything?
Yes, there's one thing that has come up as of recently, and we just received confirmation late yesterday. For the July 1st meeting, we had the Bill Q application scheduled on the agenda for July 1st. We received word from their attorney that their engineer has a conflict and will not be able to participate in that meeting. There's been a further request from that applicant if the board would consider a special meeting at some point in July. We can either discuss that now, or if you want to discuss it at the end of the meeting, it's your choice. Or if you want to have a meeting at all, it's up to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, this is Frank. I think we should discuss this at the end of the meeting. What we do on this first is going to be dependent on what happens tonight, how much progress we make and everything. So I think we should hold off on that discussion until we know where we are at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, Frank, this is Haynes. I agree with Frank. Let's wait until the end of the meeting.
And it's John, I agree, because we start now, I'll tell you right now, no.
Okay. Okay. Business from the floor. The matter is not on the agenda. This is where the public can ask questions for things that aren't on the agenda. And also, if anybody's having problems getting to the online documentation, we can talk about that right now. So if I would do it,
all participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, so is there anybody on the public line that wishes to speak about something that's not on the agenda today? Hearing none. Is anybody on the public line that hasn't been able to access the documentation we're looking at tonight? Okay, hearing none, Fred, you can close the line.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Hey, thank you for the first Yeah, John, there's still some Board of Adjustment issues I'd like to discuss. What's the status of our recommendations from 2019 for the mayor committee about those suggestions we made?
We haven't made any progress on that.
What action were taken? Who contacted them about this then?
The last, when I brought that up with the planner and the township, there's a planning board committee that's looking at the bigger picture, and they wanted to push some of our requests into that. That was about 2 months ago, and that's before the lockdown began. So I don't know if there's any progress been made with that subcommittee and the planning board.
Well, I'm telling you right now, they can't use the COVID-19 as an excuse. I didn't say it was. Yeah. And you know what? All right, and then let's get a target date. Can we have at least a target date for those items? Let's get some target dates for them to commit to.
Good. I agree.
Frank, this is I'm sorry. Chicky, I agree with John. You know, we sent those last September, and we resent them in January, and then John brought it up last month. Maybe we can get Sean, who's our liaison, or the mayor, to send us an email to tell us, you know, whatever progress has been made, if any.
And it's John again. Target dates. Any business is run that way, where if something's out there to be scheduled or put into place, there should be target dates. So let's get some target dates, because there's real.
Hey, this is Philomena.
Go ahead.
This is Philomena. Suggestion. I agree with John, Chicky, and I think Frank. Perhaps all of us, but I can't speak for that. Who is going to be the contact person at the conclusion of this meeting to seek out the necessary information? I think we need to establish that.
Frank, this is Frank.
Okay, so Frank, you will follow up perhaps tomorrow or within the end of the week and find out the status for us?
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
Frank, you have ownership. All right, so you have ownership,
Okay.
Frank.
Oh, wow, you're right. Let me make a note to myself here. Okay, noted.
And then after you get the information, Frank, will you be corresponding that with us? Via email, or will we have to wait till the next meeting, or what will happen?
No, I will.
I'm sorry, Frank and Patrick, as your board secretary, I can be used as the intermediary if need be, or we can bring it up as part of the board business at the next Board of Adjustment meeting at that point.
Frank,
Philomena again. So that we have a commitment now that at the next meeting, we will have an update on the status of the bylaws, correct?
Right. Now, it may be a status you don't like, but it may be a status you don't like, but we'll have a status.
Okay, that's all we needed was the commitment, Frank. Thank you, Chairman Frank.
And as far as that, I'm thinking even before the next meeting, if I find anything soon, I'll give everybody an email.
Right, Frank, it's
Thank
John
you.
again. Frank, it's John again. I was going to suggest that. Since you have ownership, let's have some positive reporting. So either way, we should get the word prior to the meeting. So, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. First public hearing tonight, continuation of IPPOS NJ Property Management K9 Resort. Patrick, would you reintroduce the application, please?
Yes, first application this evening is IPPOS NJ Property Management, otherwise known as K9 Resort. File number BA 19-14, located at Block 58, Lot 1.01, otherwise known as 63 Route 206. The applicant is back before the board with the preliminary and major site plan approval that will include a D use variance and C full variance and any other waivers to renovate and expand an existing building for the use of a dog care facility that will include a separate veterinarian office. The shared access and stormwater management facility with lot 1.02. Property is located in the I-3 light industrial zone. Time of decision is 6/30/20. This is continued from our June 3rd meeting without renotice.
Okay, Mr. Donut.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Attorney Anderson, and municipal staff. Thank you for taking attendance tonight at this hearing. As described by Mr. Gorman, applicant is again before you this evening seeking preliminary and final site plan approval for the project as described by Mr. Gorman. In the interest of time, I'd like to call up our first witness, Mr. Eric D-Line, who will serve as the planner for this evening's hearing. Eric, are you there? I am here. Okay. Mr. Chairman, how would you like me to introduce Mr. D-Line?
Okay, well, first of all, first of all, have him sworn in, and we'll qualify him.
Yes. Can you please raise your right hand? Is it raised?
Yes.
Okay. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
So help me God.
Okay. And can you please state your name and spell your last?
My name is Eric. It's actually E-R-I-K. Last name is DeLine, D-E, capital L-I-N, as in November, E.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. DeLine, would you tell us about the professional qualifications?
Absolutely. I am a licensed professional planner since 2013 in the state of New Jersey. I'm also certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. I completed graduate coursework at the School of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Buffalo. I have been in the planning field for just about 14 years now. I work for a Michigan group at 105 Grove Street in Montclair, New Jersey. I serve as the board planner for the Borough of Glen Ridge, as both the planning board and the zoning board planner. And
I'll stop you right there. Okay, I'll stop you right there. We can accept your qualifications.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Eric, are you familiar with the Hillsborough Township zoning ordinance? Yes, in preparation for this meeting, I reviewed the Hillsborough ordinance. I've also reviewed the 2018 Master Plan Examination Report and utilized several other resources, including the documents provided by the township in review of this application. Thank you. And as it relates to canine resorts and this application and related filings, are you familiar with those as well? I am, yes. Thank you. With that being the case, may you please offer to the board your testimony as it relates to your expertise as a planner? Absolutely. So I will start with the D1 use variance. That is that the application is applying for I guess lack of specificity as a kennel, although it serves multiple needs, including as a veterinary clinic, which is a land use identified in the zoning ordinance, but not necessarily permitted in the I-3 zone. So when it comes to a D1 use variance, there are a number of criteria that an application must meet to be considered for that granting of that use variance. The first being the positive criteria, and that is, that is that it advances the purposes of zoning under the municipal land use law. In this context, in this proposed use, the purposes of zoning are advanced through special reason A, which is to encourage municipal action to guide appropriate use or development of all land in the state in a manner which promotes the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare. Also, special reason G, which is to provide sufficient space and appropriate locations for a variety of agricultural, residential, recreational, commercial, and industrial uses in open space. both public and private, according to the respective environmental requirements in order to meet the needs of all New Jersey residents. And then also Stephanie is an I, which is the most desirable visual environment, good creative development techniques, and good design and arrangement. To these points, this particular application advances these purposes because it locates this proposed use on a highway, on a parcel, on US 206, within the I3 zone, which has a myriad number of permitted uses, although again, this specific use is not permitted, but the surrounding uses are consistent with a quasi-commercial slash, office space slash, medical use, although obviously for canines, that are consistent with some of the surrounding land uses. Again, US 206 being primarily commercial industrial, throughout the township, this particular use is consistent with the development patterns along US 206. The second point, the second test of the positive criteria is as it relates to particular suitability. In that context, site suitability is not concerned with the actual zoning criteria, but is instead focused on why the location of the site is particularly suited to the use despite the existing zoning. And then what unique characteristics of the site itself make it particularly appropriate for the proposed use rather than just the permitted use. As this relates to it, again, this goes back to some of the points I just made that the canine kennel / veterinary clinic is particularly suited because of its location on US 206, because they are the veterinary hospitals permitted in the I3 district is, again, this use is akin to that veterinary hospital, and then because it's quickly removed from other uses in that area, that is that it does not provide a negative impact on the other surrounding uses. It certainly does not impact residential uses, which would not necessarily be consistent or desirable to this proposed use. As it relates to the second half of the four-pronged test, and that relates to the negative criteria, and the first is that this proposed use should not be a substantial detriment to the public good. In my professional opinion, there is not any substantial detriment to the public good, certainly not substantial. It is an existing structure, and where the proposed development is taking place is at the rear and side of the structure, so it's not necessarily exacerbating any existing variances, although I'll get to some of the bulk variances in a minute. And then this particular property has had a history of being commercial as a child care center dating back to at least 1990, and again, it is quite a bit of distance from neighboring properties, with the exception of Temple Beth L, which was recently subdivided from. And then the fourth part is that there may not be a substantial impairment to the zone plan, and that relates to, again, the master plan, and it relates to the zoning itself. So again, there really is no substantial detriment to the zone plan. As I mentioned, this use is pretty consistent with the uses along the I3, although the I3 zone has not necessarily been expanded to these uses. That's always a drawback with the zoning ordinances, and it doesn't ever seem to consistently, it doesn't seem to be consistently keeping up with the modern land uses. I did want to clarify that it's a veterinary clinic and not a hospital, so there's not necessarily an overnight stay for sick animals, just that there may be overnight stays in the kenneling operation. But again, actually, in my opinion, there are a number of master plan goals and objectives that advance this application, but that is it not negative against the zone plan, but there has some beneficial use.
I'm sorry, Mr. Levine, 1 second, please. I have to interrupt you. It's Patrick speaking. people, just please, mute your phones if you're not going to be speaking in this moment, so we make sure that we get a clear record. And we're getting a lot of distortion on our end. Thank you.
Okay, you were saying, what has some benefits?
Yeah, so referring to the Townships 2018 Master Plan Reexamination Report, this particular application advances the Economic Development Objective 1, which is to expand employment opportunities by encouraging development in appropriate areas for this purpose and consistent with available infrastructure and supporting services. So again, no new infrastructure has to be created. It is creating new jobs in a different field. It also promotes employment opportunities and commercial services in locations compatible with existing and proposed developments. Again, referring back to the existing uses intro to that's economic development objective number 2. And then also economic development objective number 4, which is encouraging commercial development or redevelopment in suitable areas of the community that are most economically useful for commercial purposes. So again, US 206 in an I3 zone has commercial benefit, it has commercial purpose, and this proposed use does advance that. And again, it would not be negative. In fact, it's very consistent with these economic development objectives. So that is really the crux of the D1 use variance, is meeting those 4 criteria of a D1 use variance. As it relates to the bulk variances, when a use variance is sought on the assertion that the site is particularly suitable, which I made that argument for the proposed use, the required bulk variances may be considered subsumed in the consideration of this use variance. This is in accordance with Price versus Himeji in 2013, in which the court noted that although the board referred to the C2 variances, that being the flexible variances, for setbacks and coverage as subsumed in the consideration of the D variances, the record of the board's review supported that decision. The Price Court further found that the record and resolution demonstrated that the C variances advanced the purposes of the municipal land use law and created benefits that outweighed any detriments caused by the deviations from the zoning ordinance. So in this essence, we relate the existing bulk variances and the proposed bulk variances can be considered within the use variance themselves, again, as long as the positives outweigh the negatives, as they relate to a C2 variance. Now, a number of these, as it relates to the lot area and some of the front yard setbacks to 206, can be actually considered as C1 use variances. That is a condition of the property. In that respect, it's a hardship not necessarily created by the client, but the function of the parcel itself. And again, the existing building setback to 206 remains the same. And then although it is a bulk variance, it can be considered as a hardship as well. The other one that can be considered a hardship is the minimum lot area, where 2 acres is required, and 1.7 acres, I think, was the most updated planner review letter identified as 1.74 acres. Again, as a result of the subdivision from Temple Bethel, this parcel, by nature of that subdivision, is undersized, creating that hardship, which, again, the applicant cannot really add additional land without going through another subdivision, which may not actually be feasible at this time. So that leaves some additional other C2 variances, that being the proposed 6.5 feet at the front yard setback at the jug handle ramp, and then also let me just make sure I'm covering everything correctly. Also, the minimum lot width at US 206, to the west. So both of these variances can be covered under the C2, bulk variance, that again, that the departure from, strict interpretation of the zoning code, the benefits of this outweigh the detriment. So again, as it relates, specifically to the front yard setback to the jump handle exit ramp, or ramp itself, this is a function of the good civic design that I pointed out in the use variance, of adding some architectural elements to the parapet, which further basically move the existing 7.4 feet of the building closer to that ramp at the vertical point and not necessarily at the ground level. So any negative impact of by moving by 7.4 feet to 6.5 feet is really diminished by the fact that there's not any additional concerns being created by that exacerbation of the minimum front yard setback. That leaves the existing design waivers, and as they relate, that being the proposed parking spaces proposed at 10 by 18 feet with a 25-foot wide access aisle, versus the required 10 by 20 foot spaces with a 30-foot access aisle. Again, this waiver, the waiver for the buffer, the waiver of the buffer at the existing parking and driveway, waiver for the buffer at the parking lot abutting front, where 10 feet is existing and proposed, versus the 100 feet required, and the waiver for the designated loading space where none is existing or proposed and what is required. As it relates to waivers, it is a lower standard of proof than a typical bulk variance, and that is that the applicant should show or must show that the site itself operates safely, that it operates functionally, given the deviations from the required standards. And again, I'm going to defer to the engineer's testimony and some of the other testimony that was previously given to the board, that the site does function despite the undersized parking stalls, despite the undersized two-way drive aisles, and despite the buffers, and then minus the loading space for the facility, which I think the actual applicant went through some of the operations and the kind of deliveries that would be taking place. That is not unlike many office spaces and things like that, where they're getting small deliveries and a loaded dock or a loading area is not necessarily required, as long as there's sort of the typical delivery patterns that take place. So that pretty much covers everything that we had identified. Certainly can address any other design waivers or variances that might have been identified since then. But at this point, that concludes my testimony. Thank you, Mr.
Frank, this is Chicky Haynes. I couldn't quite tell from your testimony. You referred, I believe, to the two entrances into the parking lot. I see that the westerly end, I believe, has been amended to a one-way in, one-way only in. What is the width of that one? I can't make it out on the site plan. I thought you referenced a 30-foot wide something, but I'm not sure what it was.
Oh, I might have addressed, that was the 30-foot wide access aisle.
The aisle itself. Okay, what about the entrance, the westerly entrance into the parking lot?
Correct. That was amended to just be an egress only, but this specific waiver relates to the two-way parking aisle requirements of 30 feet versus the 25 feet, proposed.
Oh, okay, all right, I misunderstood that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, this is Frank. Mark, do you have any comments at this point?
Nothing at this point, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Any questions from members of the board? Okay, at this point, we'll open up to the public questions to the witness. So, Fred, if you go in line.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, is there anybody on the public line that has questions for this witness?
Yes.
Is that Susan?
Yeah, Susan Gulliford, Hunt Club Road.
Go ahead.
Okay, I have a question on the variance for the lot area, for the undersized lot. The deficit could have been corrected by purchasing a piece of the Campus Associates property to the rear, that's to the east. Commonly, applicants would contact, for example, Campus Associates and inquire about purchasing a piece of the property, which I believe is wetlands back there. And that doesn't seem to be horrible. You said adding additional area would be difficult for the applicant, but it seems like an inquiry like that would be simple. Was the inquiry made?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is Attorney Dona. The applicant is only interested in purchasing the lot and block at issue here. I'm not necessarily certain about any other outreach. The applicant is the contract purchaser of the lot discussed this evening.
That's a question we always ask if there's a possibility of overcoming the shortage.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Attorney Donagan, at this juncture, no.
Okay,
That will not be
testimony is no. Okay. So just so the board knows go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, they did not ask?
That's right. It says they did not ask for, contact them to purchase property.
Oh, okay, and the reason they didn't ask was because they didn't want it? Or because they didn't want to correct the problem that was for the variance?
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Dona, the lot and block and property in question this evening is the only piece of property the client sought to purchase. After engaging in contact with the seller, the applicant put forth a site plan application, and these variances were discovered. And the purpose of this hearing and the two hearings before, the design review committee, and all other hearings we've been before is to try to rectify the variances that have been created with this site plan application.
I understand.
Okay, I have another question. I'm not sure if it's for the planner. What is there's a residential road behind this property. Is it Johansson? Would noise be any kind of a problem for the homes back there? Also, because the Campus Associates has been rezoned for apartments, so you're going to have people living closer. I'm not sure if this is a planning question or not, about noise from this business.
As it relates to the use itself, the building and the proposed outdoor turf yards and the potential expansion of the outdoor turf yards, even to the closest principal building on Johansson, it's well over 500 feet. That is a significant distance between the proposed use and I think the concerned use. So at that point, you know, again, I don't even, you know, I can't say, I can't testify that there wouldn't necessarily, that the resident wouldn't necessarily hear barking. But any proposed use, you know, again, that is a significant distance between the two uses. It is, you know, something that, you know, again, I think given the circumstances, I mean, you can't really ask for much more of a buffer given that, given everything there. And then again, yeah, so I'm gonna leave it at that. But yeah, it's at least 500 feet between the two uses that you're asking about.
Mr. Chairman, Attorney Donahan, and I also supplement that in previous hearings and previous testimony, the applicant's professionals have advised that all care is taken to use all noise absorbing and reducing material so that there isn't any excess noise, and also in vetting and intake of the dogs, certain types of dogs or certain types of pets are preferred, and they're dogs that are not necessarily well socialized and bark too much or bark too often are not permitted at the site. So we've addressed it before.
Yes, and I recall that testimony.
And also, Chicky Haynes, I would also comment that, you know, it's not like dogs are going to be tied outside at night barking all night long. So, and they do seem to take care to minimize barking when the dogs are outside.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Are there any other people, public on the line, I would like to ask a question from this witness? Hearing none, let's move on.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Mr. Herbert, it's Patrick. I just want to clarify a couple of things for the record. Mr. DeLine, can you please specify again which variances are doing the C2 flex versus the C1?
So the C2 flex, as it relates, is to the minimum front yard requirement at the ramp from 206, and then also the minimum lot width as it relates to 216 feet along the western border.
Okay, great, thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, Tom, do you have any questions as a witness?
Not for planner at this time, thank you.
Okay. I think we're finished with your witness.
Mr. Chairman, this is Attorney Delna. That concludes the planner's testimony, and that also concludes applicant's presentation. At this point, I would turn it over to you for administration of this application.
Okay, so from the last meeting, I know we had questions about the parking and the traffic movement, and probably need to be answered by your traffic, professional.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we have tonight with us our traffic engineer, Ms. Betsy Dolan, as well as Tim Cash from Canine Resorts to answer questions related to parking and site circulation. At this point,
Okay, so I'm just trying to recall a couple of things that came up. For instance, one of the questions that wasn't answered at the last meeting for a couple of these sites that we used as examples was, I think it was Hamilton and Sam, was how many kennels and how many dogs were at each one at those locations. Because that has an impact on the, that has an impact on the traffic, report that was given to us.
If I might invite Tim from Canine up?
Yes, Tim, President.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to present Tim Cash of Canine Resorts, Vice President of Operations, to present testimony or clarification on these outstanding items.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening. Do I have to be sworn in again?
No.
You do not, but that we know that you remain under oath.
Correct. I acknowledge. Okay. So just talking about parking, I know we had discussions last time about our other comparable standalone facilities within the New Jersey market area. So Madison, Stanwood, New Jersey, and Hamilton, New Jersey. Those are all standalone facilities with dedicated parking lots. In those facilities, and I maybe not have clarified in the past, but essentially we have a model within our concept which is 6,500 to 8,500 square feet. And in that, there will be different numbers of accommodations. Some might have a little bit more, some a little bit less. And daycare capacity, how many true dogs that daycare could hold, will vary as well. But within our brand standards, because at the state level, there is no maximum capacity for dogs in the facility, our brand makes the maximum capacity for facilities, and that's $120. So essentially, our Stanwood location, our Madison location, our Hamilton, and this particular project in the application all fall within that Canine Resorts model of the square footage range, and also have a dog capacity within the facility of 120 dogs. So when we're evaluating sites just from a real estate perspective, we keep that in mind in terms of our parking needs. And now, just to give you an example, Stanwood, just similar to Hillsborough, New Jersey, does not have a parking ordinance that defines the number of dogs in a facility compared to how many parking spaces are needed. So we go off of historical data within our facilities, and Stanwood is the perfect comparison in a sense because they have been operating for 15 years. They're within that model size, and that's what we propose in terms of the Dolan testimony to the particular resort. All those locations within the New Jersey market segment that I referenced, that are standalone facilities in the 6,500 to 8,500 square foot range, all have less than 20 spaces within those facilities. I depicted the numbers last time. One thing I do want to recognize that is essentially something that might be in the mind as a delta point is we have within our testimony presented $120 within our daycare capacity. And this has been a morphing of the brand over time because what we want to do is be able to make sure we have enough spaces for our dogs that are boarding with us to also participate in daycare. So in Betsy's Dolan report, we report 90 daycare dogs. Betsy's analysis was on true daycare customers, meaning drop-off and pick-up customers. It was not an analysis on how many dogs are participating in daycare, because there's more than 90 dogs participating in daycare, because that's a function of our boarding. I don't know if that makes sense, or if I need to articulate it in another way.
Let me stop you there because I just looked at the last point, okay? So I'm looking at a traffic report on page 3, and then daycare capacity of 90 dogs, which seem to disagree with what you just said, that you have 120 dogs max at all centers.
Correct. So that would imply that, let's say, go ahead.
Okay, so if you have daycare capacity of 90 dogs, so you're saying 120, so that's 30 dogs.
Yeah, so in Betsy's report, she's talking about daycare capacity in terms of how many daycare clients we allow into our facilities. That means dropping off and picking up same day. And that, within all of our facilities, is in that 90 range as well, because we always have to provide enough daycare spaces or play spaces, let's call it, for our dogs that are boarding with us or overnight stay. So 90 is our limit for how many customers can actually enter our building and leave the building with their dog that same day for the daycare service alone. But there will be dogs that already exist in the facility that participate in that play area space with them, and that makes up that 120 max.
Okay, so Hillsborough, then you're saying you're going to have 90 daycare with a capacity of 120 when you get everything considered with the kennels and everything.
Correct, and these are all brand standards because it's not controlled on a state level, and we want to make sure that we keep brand standards for the safety and happiness of the dog.
Okay.
This is,
And again, go ahead, Chicky.
okay. I jotted down that what you said at the last meeting was 40 to 50 daycare drop-offs with, 20 boarders. Your daycare number just almost doubled. Why?
So I believe our max number that we reported has remained consistent. I might have been giving an example of averages within that. So 40 to 50 could be an average for daycare customers coming into our facility. And we'll see peaks throughout the year that could bring us up to the point of 90 or lower than 45. But, based on the number of accommodations we have in our facility, which is 88 as depicted in the floor plan by RHJ, we definitely can have that number of boarders within the facility, and that's how we design it.
So you're going to have 120 cages, correct? That's what you're telling us?
No, so it's a dog max in the facility. So we have 88 accommodations, or we can refer to it as cages. In the example, it's in parallel. There are 88, but there's not 120 cages in there. There's going to be dogs that are also participating in daycare. So there might be, in theory, 88 dogs within the boarding environment, training in their individual accommodations, and then the Delta training in daycare that came in just for that day. But there will never be more than 120 dogs in the facility, either one of our total.
And John's notes from last meeting, we had Hamilton at 85 to 88 dogs, but 120 dogs were mentioned.
This is Philomena. I have a question. When you reach the capacity numbers that you just gave us, what is the next step that you would take for someone who has an interest?
Yeah, certainly. So just to give you an example, Fanwood and Madison have gotten to points where, so you open up year one, you're not going to be at max capacity. There's not going to be 120 dogs in the building at any given time, really, in year one. This thing evolves over time. Our boarding accommodations, we can easily forecast. So people make reservations anywhere from 2 to 2 weeks to maybe 16 weeks in advance when swinging their travel plan. So those things are predictable. So we can say next week at Fanwood, we're going to have 60 dogs staying with us overnight, as an example. So we know what the daycare perspective could be within that. And we've introduced within our point of sale system a booking system. So once we get up to a capacity where we can't take on any more daycare clients, they actually go on a wait list. So we want to have enough space available every day for our daycare clients. Once we reach that plateau, then daycare clients are not accepted into the system, so there's more room available. Almost similar to a child daycare concept in that light, that there's only so many seats in the class. And this particularly happens once you get up to year 3, 4, or 5 in operation.
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm just going to point out again on page 3 of the traffic report, in the middle paragraph, is the current K9 resort in Fanwood has a boarding capacity of 82 dogs, a day capacity for 90 dogs, okay? And she gives us the traffic information. And then in the last paragraph, she says the Hillsborough is going to have a boarding capacity of 88 dogs and daycare capacity of 120 dogs. So, you seem to be contradicting the traffic report.
Frank, this is I'm sorry. Okay, different question. Last time, Mr. Cashew said that there would be no overnight employees there, but there would be monitors. Who will be responsible for watching the monitors in case a dog gets sick or something?
So there's the standard within the boarding daycare industry, as we mentioned last time, not to have somebody overnight, and typically 24-hour monitoring of each dog in each accommodation is not typical within the boarding and daycare industry as well. So typically what we're doing is we're monitoring them, generally the general managers or the manager on duty for that day. We'll be monitoring them throughout the kind of evening hours, in a sense. Lights will be out within the facility, and then there will be a period until the next morning when people aren't actively monitoring each dog within the facility. However, they will be monitored by fire and security style systems, which are alert both the police department, the fire department, and the general manager himself.
And what would trigger that alert? What would trigger that alert? Mrs. Filomena.
In regards to fire, would be through the fire system that would be installed by the contractor, and security, they're typically going with ADT. So we'll have shock sensors, we'll have window sensors, and we'll have motion sensors within the facility, all the doors and windows that anything can be an entry point for an intruder.
So that would take care of fire. What about an emergency with a dog or a problem that they may have?
So we do everything within our operating protocol to eliminate anything that could be self-induced by the dog in a sense. So the way we design our accommodations, they're, almost dog-proof in a sense, so they can't harm themselves in any way. There's no leashes that they can get tangled in. There's nothing within their grab that can cause any type of negative impact on them. Same thing with toys. So at nighttime, we discussed last time which toys were allowed in the facility and which weren't. Even the toys we will remove before we leave for the facility today, this way we prevent any choking hazards. Also, we mentioned that we eliminate any blankets or anything that can absorb liquids from the facility, so those eliminate choking hazards as well. So all things in terms of their active eating is monitored while we're there. Anything at nighttime is just them sleeping. Is there potential for natural causes of death? Yes, there is, same as there is with a human hotel in that light.
Okay, are there any more questions? I'd like to get back to the quick board. Go ahead.
Chairman, this is Tom Neff. I might be able to provide some insight on that. Just rereading the traffic report, and as you indicated, their numbers were based on the Fanwood facility, which is smaller than what they're proposing, at least as far as the maximum number of dogs. But what they did was they took the Fanwood numbers and they increased them proportionally to what the maximum would be at this facility. So, for example, the parking numbers, the maximum parking demand at Fanwood was 14 spaces. So based on the additional number of dogs that could be at this facility, they anticipated that 19 spaces could be required. So when you look at the overall parking for the whole site, we can't forget the vet use. So if they're saying 19 spaces are required for canine, which does seem reasonable based on the other existing facilities, but 19 is required for the canine, and based on only 2 veterinary offices being proposed, or rooms, there's a total of 31 required spaces between the 2 uses, where they have 32 proposed.
Yes, and I agree with that, and I understand that. My only question for Mr. Cash was that, before he leaves the, witness stand here, that that he did state that Fanwood had 120, and that the report said 90. And I'm fine with 120 for Hillsborough.
As a point of clarification for me, please, this is Philomena. When you look at that example, and in terms of the parking spaces, what about the actual size of the facility? The increase on the size of the facility to accommodate?
So the square footage is about 800 square foot difference between Hillsborough. Yeah, the interior square footage. Hillsborough is about 800 square foot bigger. And where we've articulated that space, I would say half of that was into the daycare area. As we mentioned, the daycare capacity, we want to be able to make sure our boarding dogs can participate in that play area during the day. So that's why, as a brand, we strategically shifted and made our daycare spaces bigger in terms of square footage. But it will not increase the total number of dogs that can be in the facility at any given time, because we restrict that as a brand.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Cash, your testimony was that 120, if you're not going to have a parking problem with that many spaces, 32 spaces with 120 doors. I think that's what you said.
This is John speaking. There's a lot of background noise going on.
Background noise. I can't hear you.
Yeah, somebody's doing your papers. Thank you.
Okay, so Mr. Cash, your testimony last time was that you have enough parking from your experience. If we can get into the traffic numbers with the traffic consultant.
Mr. Chairman, it's Patrick speaking. So just to make it clear for the board is that the applicant is requesting a use variance in this situation for a kenneling facility or the Canine Resort facility for 120 animals with 71 spots. If there's potential alterations of this or an expansion of this, since this is a use variance, they would need to come back before the board for a to amend the resolution and or site plan and or variance.
Right, and Patrick, let me ask you this question. So it sounds like we should put a condition for this, they have a maximum of 120 dogs?
Well, no, this is what they're coming in for at the moment. This is what they're describing, and these are some of the reasons they're basing your use variance on overall. They are giving you specific information of how many employees that they need to accommodate this thing, or accommodate this place, how much traffic's going to be coming in here, and how many customers have we seen both for overnight and for daycare only services. Not to mention too is the site plan also has to work in conjunction with the veterinary clinic. To reiterate is that from our past meetings that it was for 2 exam rooms and or 1 exam room, 2 doctors, wherever the ordinance can accommodate to also accommodate the parking on the site.
Right. So you're saying we don't
Listen, this is John. We already discussed that, and there was testimony on all that, right? So I don't understand the point.
John, I'm just reiterating for the board of what we're talking about, so there's a clear record of what we're discussing and what we need to vote on.
All right, because I don't want to review the whole application again.
I'm not doing that, Mr. Stanler. We can move on at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
I'd like to make a comment on that. I found that what Patrick just said tied in with my concern about what you're going to do when you reach capacity. And I think putting that in there as a condition as to what Patrick just said is very important to get on the record, respecting what, the testimony that was given by the applicant.
It's part of the application.
I understand that, but I still think it's important enough to have put it in as a condition.
Yeah, and
it's part of an application. Why do we need a condition for something that is already in the application? I'm not understanding you, Bill.
Okay. And this is Frank, and that's why I raised the question with Patrick. Since it's already in there, do we have to put it in the second time as a condition? I think Patrick's saying, no, it's already in there.
It's already part of this application, and Mr. Anderson, I believe, will be part of the record as part of the resolution that will be spelled out of exactly what they're applying for before the board, correct?
That's certainly true. It's the kind of thing that would be reflected in the testimony. Nevertheless, frankly, I think that it would make sense if the board feels that that's important that it be stated as a condition, simply because it would mean sort of one-stop shopping. Somebody looks at the resolution, they see clearly what the conditions are, as opposed to have to digging through the record or going back to the application itself.
Okay. And as for the applicant, do you agree that's an acceptable condition?
Well,
Mr. Chairman, one moment.
Okay.
All right, if that's going to be a condition, I'll let Phil make the motion.
Okay. And I'm asking the applicant that he has no problem with that condition, right?
No, we do agree to that condition.
Okay.
That'll be limited to 120 dogs.
Who said that? Yeah, I'm thinking of that song, Who Let the Dogs Out? Okay, any more questions for this witness? Everybody's satisfied how many dogs are going to be there, and we'll get into more of the parking space adequately with the traffic witness. Any more questions for this witness? Mark, question for you. Do I need to open it up for questions to the public again, or is it?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. At this point, are there any questions for this witness, from his current testimony? Fred, would you please open the line?
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, so
Yes.
anybody on the, go ahead.
Yes, Susan Delaford, Hunt Club Road. Sorry, I'm still finding this format challenging. Was that the operations manager? It was a follow-up to a question from the board about nighttime monitoring?
No, yes, this is he's not the, well, Mr. Keck, we give you the exact title from,
Yeah, it's Timothy Katz, Vice President of Operations for Canyon.
That's the person I wanted. I missed what you said. Did you say, aside from fire and security and things like that, did you say there's also temperature sensors in case of a loss of, for example, air conditioning or heat?
So there are sensors that will monitor things within the fire system, and those things will be reported back. I do not have a direct description of the temperature reading, but we can certainly look into that for you and provide it to the board. But I believe temperature is checked within all facets of the facility based on the HVAC monitoring systems that come with the training for the units that are specifying within this process.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure if I was hearing it correctly. Thank you.
Anybody else have questions for this witness? Hearing none, Fred, you can use the line again, please.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay, Mr. Dona, if you want to talk to the traffic engineer, or traffic consultant at this point, then.
Okay. Ms. Betsy Donnelly, might you please, come up in front of the,
Yes,
welcome.
I'm here.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, do we need to swear in and requalify Ms. Dolan?
No, just, Mr. Anderson will remind her that she's under oath previous.
It's certainly not necessary to requalify her or to have her sworn again, as long as she acknowledges on the record that she understands that she continues to be under oath for the balance of her testimony.
Yes, I understand. I'm still under oath.
Okay.
And excuse me, can I have your name, please, and spell your last? Elizabeth Dolan, D-O-L-A-N. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Dolan, I think that in my mind there's two major questions the board has. Number one, is there sufficient parking at the site for the operation? And number two, are you going to get any backup on 206, people waiting for parking? And number three, is the traffic pattern, the new traffic pattern that might put on the site plan, the latest change, that needs to be discussed. A couple of members had a concern about that the last time. Okay, so why don't we just jump into how you came up with the number of spaces that you did in your report?
Sure. I've been studying the canine site in Fanwood since 2006, and studying it in part for other applications, other sites that you've heard testimony about, Madison, Hamilton, and a few others that didn't go anywhere. So I've been there. I'm also a Fanwood resident, so I'm at that site on a regular basis because there's nearby parking at shops I go to, but I have performed formal studies, and the maximum parking that we've recorded has been 14 at Fanwood. And so, as I believe it was your engineer mentioned a few minutes ago, we prorated the 90 capacity at Fanwood. That's the number we've been given, a year or so ago. So we used 90 at Fanwood. We're talking about 120 here. So it's a factor of about 33% increase. So when we apply that increase to the max demand we recorded at Fanwood, we calculate 19 as an anticipated max demand for the Hillsborough site, based on actual counts at Fanwood and prorating it from 90 to 120 for the daycare capacity, because that, of course, is the busiest activity at canine resorts.
Right.
So we calculate 19.
Not the bed. Go ahead.
Right. So throughout the testimony, that's just for the daycare. And so then for the vet office, based on your ordinance requirement
and the 2 exam rooms that we've, agreed to go to, that would be 12. So the total required would be 31, and we've got 32 on site. I also did reference there's a new publication or a new edition of the Parking Generation Manual by the Institute of Transportation Engineers. And for a vet clinic, there are ratios of parking demands based on building area or employees. The maximum that I calculated for this proposed facility would be 7 spaces. So some more recent data, because this latest edition of the Parking Generation Manual just came out last year, and it had new data specifically for vet clinics. So that would be 7. So we've kind of got a factor of safety of 5 compared to your ordinance requirement, plus the 1 additional, because we're saying 31 versus 32 proposed. So from my perspective, and having studied K9, which I believe is going to be the greater parking generator at this site, I do feel comfortable with the parking supply that will be provided for the 2 uses next to one another.
Okay.
Chicky Haynes, I have a question. Your fanwood number with you said the max you saw there was 14. Now, did that include the 8 to 10 employees that I believe Mr. Thatch said worked there?
Oh, yes, definitely, because the way that parking lot's configured, it's sort of on 2 sides of the building, and the majority of the, all of the employees, they park on the side that's furthest from the door, leaving the spaces in the front, which is only, I think, 7 spaces up front for the customers. And that's always been sufficient for the pickup drop-off, leaving a few spaces available around the corner if there was ever need for overflow. But it most definitely includes the staff as well as the people picking up and dropping off their pets.
Okay, one other quick question. Would you recommend signs on the driveway itself, no parking or no standing signs, so that you don't have people tempted to park there and run across rather than pulling into the parking lot?
I don't know why anybody would stop in a live lane, and it seems to be a very comfortable parking supply. I would think that just through the normal course of operation that the employees would park on the southerly side of the circulation aisle, leaving the spaces closer to the building for the pickup drop-off and then anyone going to the vet clinic. I think it's a pretty basic, normal parking lot, and I don't think people would stop in the aisle. If the board felt that certain signage or striping should be provided, we'd agree to that.
No, not in the parking lot. No, the driveway that goes straight through to the back.
I see, the drive aisle on the south side.
Right.
Yeah, we could throw up a no parking sign there, sure.
Okay.
Okay, this is Frank. So you're saying that we don't have to worry about stocking into the highway at all because you're always going to have sufficient spaces there?
That's right, and I would also point out that the prior daycare operation would have had, possibly potential for that, because it takes much longer to take the children out of the car and bring them into the building or escort them back from the building and put them into the cars. The turnover for the dog daycare is very quick. You're talking 1 to 3 minutes max for people to park, bring their dog in, come back out, and leave. So the parking turnover is a lot faster than with conventional daycare. So again, between the parking supply and the high turnover, I don't see the potential for backing out onto the state highway.
Okay. Does any of the board members have any concerns about that, about insufficient parking?
I just, this is Philomena. 1 to 3 minutes, and I'm relying on your research and statistics. 1 to 3 minutes seems like a very, very limited amount of time to accomplish this in my mind. Can you help me understand that a little bit better?
Sure, and some of it goes to the operations testimony from 2 weeks ago, but the dogs are all pre-registered. So the driver opens the door, gets the dog out, takes the dog into the vestibule. The vestibule is where a staff member takes the dog. There's no signing in, there's no paperwork. All that has been done ahead of time So the person brings the dog into the building, goes back to their vehicle and leaves. So it's a pretty quick turnover because it's just a pickup drop-off and all the paperwork's been done ahead of time.
Okay. Still sounds a little quick, but I accept your testimony.
Well, and just for, just to kind of compare it, the typical amount of time to bring a child into or out of a daycare and get them in or out of the car, that's 6 to 7 minutes. And which, it sounds like it's very quick, but when you sit and time it, that's the average is about 7 minutes per child.
Okay, appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and the last question we had was the new traffic pattern that Mike Ford put on the latest site plan, where before he showed traffic going two-way in the parking area because we're insisting on one-way in on the driveway. Okay, so over in the parking area, he had possible traffic coming in from the the east side and going around and exiting back on the east side because we didn't want people trying to come out on the west side entrance because we were concerned about cars hitting each other, crossing over, coming and leaving that spot. And Chicky, that was your concern.
Yeah, I thought that was a good question at the last meeting. I think the natural tendency is for the driveway closest to 206 to be the entrance in. People will enter from the highway, they'll turn left into this parking lot, they'll park, and then because they can't exit, that's the same way they came in, they're going to travel east along the parking aisle and then exit and circle around the temple and go back to 206. So I think that making that one way just sort of formalizes what would be the natural traffic pattern. So I thought that was a good suggestion at the last meeting.
Yes. Chicky, you have any further questions?
No, I just want to thank them for, putting it on the map.
Hey, sorry, this is Jim Walnacher. If the aisle is going to be one way, then where the parking is, does that make sense to have slanted spaces to kind of force people to go that direction, or is there not enough room to do that?
Now, Jim,
I think it's overkill. Yeah.
Right? The latest site plan shows two-way in the parking, around the parking spot.
But what's the motivation for somebody to go back in that direction since they can't exit to 206 there anyway? It seems like you'd improve flow.
If they came in...
Yeah.
The only thing I can say, it's Betsy Dolan speaking, is that if someone did enter at the south end of the site, at the other driveway that's two-way between the medical office and the temple, if they came in there and they came up around behind the temple and then they entered into that easterly driveway, that would be the only movement. I think that the majority of daycare and vet visitors are going to use that northern driveway on 206. And just to the question about angling the spaces, typically when you angle spaces, you lose spaces. I think that, I think generally this will work in one direction, and I think it would be overkill to try and angle the parking and then potentially lose parking.
Yeah, and you raised a good point. I wasn't considering people coming in from the south side, just those entering from 206, so it makes sense, doesn't it? Thank you.
Yes.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mark, any questions from you?
I do have a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Ms. Dolan, if you could describe for me, I'd appreciate it, how you see the entire flow of traffic through this site, and although I think that part you may have covered reasonably well, but particularly the flow off this particular lot. The traffic which might be entering, but would have to exit this lot through the temple parking lot. And frankly, what I'm most concerned about is it would appear that the only exit from this parking lot would naturally take traffic through the westerly drive aisle behind the temple, which, according to the temple site plan, has parking on both sides. That would seem to maximize the possibility of conflict between people using this site and people who are parking and perhaps bringing their children to the temple. And it would seem that it is not the natural flow that people would come out of the parking lot to this site, turn left and then right to use the back or easterly drive aisle of the temple, which, as I understand, the temple site plan at least has parking only on one side. I hope that I've made my question clear. If I have not, I will turn.
No, I think I understand what you're saying is that if someone is leaving the canine and vet parking area, they're basically at a four-way intersection, and so they either would turn left or they would go straight through to proceed through the temple parking lot to get to the exit. I know there is some activity with the Montessori school at the temple. I think it's only about 15 students, and so there's some drop-off during that time, so I think there may be some activity that might be visible to someone exiting the canine and vet parking lot that might encourage them to turn left. If we wanted to further encourage people to turn left, you know, again, we could add a sign at that location that says left turn only, as opposed to, you know, trying to encourage any through movements. But I think in the morning anyway, some of that Montessori drop-off may help to push the canine drop-off people to the most easterly lane. But otherwise, you know, we'd have to put a sign if you wanted to truly prohibit that movement or discourage it.
Well, I appreciate your answer. Implicit in that, I think, is an understanding. Correct me if I'm not interpreting your answer correctly, but it seems to be implicit in that answer is you're acknowledging that the easterly drive aisle, the one that has parking only on one side, and indeed would have parking only on the side to which children getting out of cars would be headed. But that drive aisle would be safer of the two for people exiting this site. Would you agree with that?
I'm sorry, I think I missed a little bit about the part where you were talking about the children going to the Montessori school.
Well, children, whether they're going to Montessori school or otherwise, you know, this is a temple. This is certainly I'm aware from testimony in other cases and from my own personal knowledge that you know, this is a family-oriented facility. So there are children around. But let me put this in several questions, maybe a little easier. First of all, as I understand it, the easterly drive aisle through what I would say is the back of the temple parking lot has parking only on the westerly side. Is that your understanding?
That is correct, yes.
All right. Now, the temple itself is also in the westerly direction from that drive aisle, correct?
West of the drive aisle, yes.
So whether it's children or adults for that matter, people getting out of cars in that drive aisle would have little or no reason to walk toward the traffic lane. They would be headed in the opposite direction. Is that a fair conclusion?
Anybody parking in the temple parking lot would be walking towards the temple in a westerly direction.
Yes, but specifically in the easterly drive aisle, the people would have no need to go easterly. That is, they would have no need to
Correct.
go toward the traffic.
Right, there's nothing east of that drive aisle. Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the westerly drive aisle, there are are people parking on the easterly side who would need to cross the car lane in order to get to the temple, correct?
Correct, yes.
And indeed, people who were parked in the easterly drive aisle would also be crossing the westerly lane of traffic.
Correct.
Right. With that background, and again, I certainly acknowledge your mentioning the possibility of putting a do not enter, but for the westerly drive aisle through the temple parking lot, is there any reason why at the junction of the lot junction, that is the junction of the lots between the temple and the Canaan lot, is there any reason why that should be two-way?
Well, I think because it's a conventional 90-degree parking configuration, it lends itself to two-way. I would think that, and I haven't, studied the patterns, but it would seem to me that since the driveway at the north end of this composite site is in only, the majority of movements are likely to be in at that driveway and then right into the westerly lot to the east of the temple. Since everyone has to exit at the southern end of the temple, I would think that it would function more as a southbound aisle than a northbound aisle unless someone comes in the southerly Route 206 driveway, enters, and loops through that westerly parking aisle, and then comes up to this four-way intersection at the K9 vet lot, and then loops back around. So it seems to lend itself to one way in the southbound direction, which is probably not what you're looking to do. And again, when it's a 90-degree configuration with a 24 or 25-foot aisle, I'm not sure the dimension there, it's hard to prohibit or encourage a one-way movement. And I'm not sure that we would want it to be northbound based on the activities associated with the temple. But again, I haven't studied those specific movements at the temple.
Well, I guess that really is a lot of the direction of my questions to ask you to think about that. What you just said suggests to me that perhaps it would make sense to make the westerly drive aisle behind the temple one way south only, because the only exception, the only reason that at least I heard you describe for anybody going northbound in that aisle would be if they came through that aisle to get to the vet clinic. And I would think that would be precisely the kind of traffic movement that should be discouraged.
Mark, this is Frank. I'm thinking back to the temple application, and it seems like the main entrance to the temple is in the southerly parking lot between Doctor's Care and the temple, so those people would have to head north once they turn left and head north, right?
I'm not sure I understand which aisle you're talking about.
Okay, so as I recall, the main entrance to the temple is not the one between the temple and K9. It's between temple and Doctor's Care on the south end. So they came in.
I'm not sure that's true. Maybe Ms. Dolan can opine on that, but that certainly is one of the relatively easy ways, and people remember the entire property has belonged to the temple in the past, so I would think that the congregants at the temple might be quite used to using that driveway.
Well, again, my recollection, plus I'm looking at their site plan, and it shows that traffic flow, So.
It does, yes. Well, I certainly acknowledge that, but, we have a traffic engineer dealing with this lot, and at least with respect to this lot, it seems to me that discouraging traffic through that westerly drive aisle would be beneficial for certainly pedestrian safety and perhaps also fender bender safety.
This is Tom Neff here, if I could chime in quickly. I think changing the temple's existing two-way to one-way may be difficult. It would just be difficult to enforce that, for one. It's really set up for two-way, and without revising the whole layout on the temple, I think it really is set up for two-way. But I do agree, Mr. Anderson, with your concern about increasing traffic through there. And I was going to mention some similar comments. I think what would really be increasing the traffic through that is the vehicles exiting the canine facility, heading south, straight out of their intersection. So I think what might help is at the exit from the canine, at the stop sign there, to put in that left turn only arrow. So you put up a sign for left turn only, and you also stripe the pavement instead of having a straight arrow there. You stripe the left turn arrow right on the pavement. So between those two, it should direct most of the vehicles to the eastern aisle, which is really, once they're on there, that's a direct route out of the site anyway. And that would help separate the two uses, the canine and the temple. And if you wanted to take it one step further, you could even post a sign across from the intersection saying something like temple access only. Those would be my recommendations to try and separate those sites a little bit. And I agree with what you're saying to keep the canine vehicles from cutting through the temple's westerly drive aisle while they're exiting.
That sounds like it would be sufficient.
Mr. Dolan, do you agree that you could put in the left turn only sign and the arrow at the exit drive?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that would be the appropriate treatment.
Thank you.
Mark, anything else?
No other questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. No more questions from members of the board. We'll open this up to the members of the public. So, Fred, would you open up on each of the public lines?
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
At this point, in this moment, is there any questions from members of the public on the public line to this witness?
Yes, Susan Gower, Fort Hunt Club Road.
Go ahead.
Okay. I want to follow up, I'm not sure which board member, the question about the time for the turnover on the parking spaces, the 1 to 3 minute time for drop-off and pickup. For daycare, I see that's understandable, but I wonder, are they also using the 1 to 3 minutes for boarding dogs? Because in my experience, by the time an owner drops them off, leaves their supplies and all their special instructions and says goodbye, which in itself can take 1 to 3 minutes. It seems like you're going way over 1 to 3, and even picking them up, the owner enters, they pay, the staff retrieves the dog and all their belongings. They get info on the dog's stay, goes to the owner. That seems like you're talking, is the 1 to 3 only for daycare dogs, or does that also apply to boarding dogs?
We've specifically studied the daycare operation because that's the busiest time for canine. There's more traffic during those periods, and that's also the typical periods of a traffic impact study. So that timing is specifically associated with pickup drop-off.
For the daycare.
Susan, this is Frank. If you recall, I believe Mr. Cash's testimony at the last meeting is that they basically don't start kennel drop-off until after daycare busy hours over. So I think the hours of operation were after 9 o'clock or something. So those two things shouldn't be happening at the same time.
Okay, but the other thing, I was thinking about the turnover time for the veterinary parking spaces, but of course that would be longer and there's no way you can figure out that one. It depends on what's wrong with the dog. Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more questions from members of the public? Hearing none, Fred, you can...
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay, so, Zona. Okay, so let me ask you, does any members of the board have questions for the engineer, Mike Ford? He gave us a memo on June 5th that I think covered everything except the traffic, which is Dawn just covered. Does anybody need to call him back for any questions?
Yes.
This is Tom Neff here. Sorry, I do have one question for Mike Ford. It'll be quick, hopefully.
Pat Gorman saying here, just there's an additional waiver request that needs to be filled out with this.
Patrick, was that for Mike or from?
For Mike, but Tom, you can start first with Mr. Ford if he's available.
Okay, so Mr. Denai, I guess it sounds like we're finished with traffic consultant.
Thank you, Betsy. Mr. Ford, if you could come up, please.
Yes, I'm here. Mike Ford, Michael Ford, Ford, appeared at the 2 prior hearings, agreed to continue to testify truthfully. Still a licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey.
So that rumor was false then, huh?
And I'm still at work. I'm not at home at my dining room table.
Okay, go ahead with
That's all right. Thank you, gentlemen. People hanging in there with us.
Thank you. Mr. Ford, at the last hearing, there was some concerns and questions from the board members about putting some landscape and buffering between the Route 206 ramp and the fence. So I see you did add some landscaping along that fence line, but it looks like most of the landscaping that's provided is shrubs, maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 feet high. This is an 8-foot fence, I believe, that you're putting in. Could we get some full evergreen trees in there? 6-foot evergreen planted instead of shrubs, just so they provide more of a buffer and screening for such a large fence like this?
Well, we do, they would have to be columnar because we only have about 8 feet between where the building is and the property line as well as where the fence is and the property line. But yes, we could substitute some of those shrubs for, columnar growing evergreens.
Yeah, if there's something just to get a little more height in there, just to try and blend in some of the fence. Thank you. That's all I have for Mr. Ford.
Patrick, did you have something?
Hi, Mr. Ford. Patrick speaking. There was one update from the last meeting that was added to the plan was adding the fence, the foot rail fence with the mesh length by 206 to prevent any potential dog that got away from running on 206 and hopefully not get hit by a car. But that type of fence, I believe, will require an additional waiver from the board. Does the board have any preference on this fence? Do you want to see aluminum? I'm not sure if you saw the detail yet.
It's John. I have no preference. Whatever they decide is fine.
Okay.
Mr. Anderson, any questions for Mr. Ford?
No, thank you.
Okay, we'll open up the line for public questions for Mr. Ford.
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, are there any members of the public online that have a question for Mr. Ford? Okay, hear none. You can
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay, so,
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
I was so glad that I didn't hear my wife calling to ask me when I was going to be home tonight, in the public section.
Maybe she doesn't
I'm sorry, real quick, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ford, real quick, this, not to do with this application, but with the bill 2 application, Can you hang on for a minute after, the board votes on this matter, just to clarify a couple things to the board?
Yes, sir.
Tried to reach out to
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Rodnick earlier, and I couldn't get a direct connection back with him. So, just to clarify a couple things. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly, I think, Mr. Anderson, you can have any, I know you had correspondence with Donat early today about the court property agreement. Is there anything to be said about that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I received an email Mr. Donat sent, I believe at 6:45. I saw that when I came to the office for this meeting. During the meeting, I've done my best to look at that and still, of course, keep close attention to the proceedings at the hearing. The most important document which Mr. Donat has sent is what appears to be a vacation of Oneida Street. As long as that's confirmed, that really resolves the primary concern that I had is, what was the status of that? If that street has been vacated, then the property owners, of course, can do what they wish. Mr. Donat earlier sent me what he admits are fairly rough drafts of easements, cross-access easements. They're relatively straightforward. I didn't have any particular trouble with them, although I did note in an email back to him that the details are in the descriptions, and I don't have the descriptions yet. However, the fundamental question appears to be resolved, that as long as the board imposes a condition that there be approved cross-access, it appears that the property owners, all three property owners together, have the power to do that.
Great. So, at this point, Mr. Nye, you're finished with your testimony, I think?
Mr. Chairman, at this point, this does conclude the K-9 application testimony.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'm going to ask the motion to open for public comment on this application. Good.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Somebody give me a motion to open public.
So moved.
Who was that?
Haynes.
Okay. Second?
Janino, second.
Okay. Since we're on a teleconference, I'd ask for a roll call vote on that.
All right, just you want a roll call vote?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Valchek?
Yes.
Ms. Erickson? Yes. Mr. Stambler?
Yes.
Ms. Haynes? Yes. Ms. Lilly?
Yes.
Mr. Woolmarker?
Yes.
Chairman Herbert?
Yes. At this point, I'm going to ask Fred to open the public line for public comments on this application. So this is the opportunity to give you 2 cents and tell us what you think about it. Okay, so
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, so are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this application? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to close, and I'll take a voice vote this time. Motion to close. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none. Okay. Mrs. Donat, would you like to summarize your application to the board?
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Mr. Chairman, again, thank you to you, the other board members, and Attorney Anderson and municipal staff for traveling with K-9 Resorts along this journey. 3 hearings were here, but I think the applicant has put forth a cogent application for approval. The applicant is looking forward to hopefully establishing a new business within the township that's a revenue and tax generating business, and just being a great corporate citizen. as it relates to the description of the project. At this point, Mr. Gorman did a fantastic job reviewing where we are, and we're here just seeking preliminary final site plan approval from the board. Thank you for your indulgence. I hope everyone stays healthy and well.
And thank you for participating. Sorry it took so long with everything that happened. Okay,
Good things come to those who wait, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, any more comment from the professional staff?
No further comment, Mr. Chairman.
Open the floor for discussion by the board. Who wants to start first? No discussion? Okay, in that case, do I hear a motion?
I think Phil was gonna make
Okay, who spoke first? Janine?
I thought Phil was gonna make the motion.
Okay. Phil?
I was going, go ahead. Oh, okay, I thought I were Haynes. While I have some reservations about the maximum size of the facility for dogs, I do think that the applicant has done a reasonable job of accommodating board members' comments and making changes to make the site as safe as possible for both dogs and traffic issues. I would make a motion to approve. The variances that have been requested.
I'd like to ask Mark if he would, on that capacity concern that I had, if you could put some verbiage together into that motion, I'd appreciate that.
Phil, first you need a second and then discussion, I guess.
Second, please. Is there a second? Who's that?
Yeah, Frank Balchek, second.
Okay, second by Frank Balchek.
All right, Mr. Chairman, as Haynes' request, as usual, I've kept a list of those things which have been discussed, which may conceivably interest the board as a matter of conditions. And of course, as usual, these are not recommendations, either for or against. These are simply my notes for the board's consideration. I would start with hours of operation. As requested in the application, and in case somebody does not have that in front of them, the application says hours of operation for the Canine Resort, open to the public 7 a.m., 7 p.m., staffed 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., Saturday and Sunday, open to the public 9 a.m., closed 5:30, staffed 7 to 7. Then for the veterinary clinic, Monday through Friday, open to the public 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., Sunday closed. Then also their application indicates 10 to 11 staff for the canine resorts, which I would take as a maximum of 11, and 3 to 5 for the veterinary clinic, which again I would take as 5 maximum.
It's Patrick real quick. I'm sorry, how much, go back to the veterinary again, please?
This is exactly as indicated in the application. Monday through Friday, open to the public, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m., Saturday, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. I may have misspoken before. Sunday closed.
Okay, thank you.
Mark, was that Sunday closed for the boarding aspect or just the daycare part?
No, that is just for the veterinary clinic. For the canine resorts, Saturday and Sunday, both they're proposing open to the public from 9 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., staffed 7 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Again, besides these are what are requested, what condition the board believes it should impose is up to the board.
And Patrick, were there any other waivers that we missed or should specify?
I think Mark's going through the kind of list at the moment. I'll reiterate if need be.
Yeah, let's let Mark finish.
Yeah, Mark.
I'm going to ask Mr. Gorman to go through the list because, in particular, I'm not sure that I have a note on the final waiver that he identified.
Sure.
But let me run down the rest of these again for the board's consideration.
I'm sorry, but you were finished.
The next issue is cross-access easement, which we've discussed a number of times. It would appear to me that cross-access easement among three properties is essential for the operation as the traffic operation as it's been testified to. The three properties being, of course, the application property, the temple property, and then the what's I think most of us identify as your doctor's care property further to the south. All three properties are need to participate in that, and Mr. Dodd has certainly indicated that he is discussing that and expects that to be done. I would suggest the condition would be cross-access easements across those three properties to the satisfaction of the board engineer and the board attorney. The next item that I see is fencing. Believe that all of the fencing which the board has requested are on the latest plan, but I encourage the board to look at that, and if the board doesn't think the fencing that they have spoke about or thought was necessary is there, we ought to speak up and make an additional condition. There was discussed in the last meeting, I believe, additional landscaping at the trash enclosure, which in the normal course would be for the approval of the board engineer or the board planner, whichever the board thinks is appropriate. Discussed today with Mr. Ford was 6-foot evergreens at the fence. This would be I might call it the new fence. Again, the normal language would be to the satisfaction of board engineer. There was a representation, as I understand it, that the vet clinic will have no overnight dogs, patients, whatever you want to call them. The vet clinic itself would not. If that is the board's understanding, I think it would be appropriate to clarify that as a condition. Maximum 2 veterinarian examination spaces. I do believe that the plans have been revised to indicate that, but I think for clarification, because this does represent a change, it would make sense to specify that. There was discussion earlier, or at least questions about the fact that the applicant has not made any request or inquiry about additional land. Leave it to the board as to whether the applicant should be required to make such an inquiry. I believe that there is a representation that there would be no dogs outside at night, although I don't see that as direct testimony, so I think, again, it may be appropriate to make that a condition. But if we're talking about, quote, at night, unquote, hours should be attached to that. There was discussion about a maximum of 120 dogs on the site at any one time. Again, I indicated before that while that seems to have been clearly represented, I think for clarity for people reading a resolution in the future would say it. There was discussion about no parking signs on what I will call the former Cayuga Street, what is now the access between the canine applicant property and the temple. and traffic signs, and marking to limit traffic exiting, the K-9 facility traveling through the West Temple parking aisle. That is a condition the board, would attach. The normal language would be that would be done to the satisfaction of the board engineer. That is the list that I have.
Mark, this is Philomena. There was an interruption on the condition for capacity. Did you include that in there for increase?
I did. Well,
to come back at a separate time. To come back at a separate time, if they wanted to. Yes.
Ms. Lilly, I did go over that, although there is a representation, as I understand it, of a maximum of 120 dogs on the site at any one time. It would be my recommendation that that be specified as a condition for clarity.
Yeah, you mentioned that, Mark.
Mark, it's Patrick. Just a few other things to reiterate is that the request is for the D variance plus C1 and C2 variances. And then also, just a reminder that we're also including the Phase 2 portion of this at this point. If they're ready to go, it's a part of this plan. We also have to raise that there was a waiver for some of the parking standards in my memorandum. Also a waiver of the loading space. There's also the architecturals that the signs were going to be revised to meet the township standards, if I recall. And then, but the ASDA waivers that we will need. They would need the waivers for the general building design, the roofs and materials, for the fence, both on the ram side of the dog enclosure area and the protection fence. And then, as you stated before, was that they would put the plantings around the recycling if they've not already. That's all I have right now.
It's John, too. It's John. There's a waiver also for the site lighting, I believe.
Yes. Can you just double check that real quick? That in my report.
Yeah, from 6 to 3.
Has reminded me, and I did miss it on my list. There was a representation that about lighting in the parking area at night, although nobody, I think, has specifically identified what at night means. So thank you, Mr. Stamler.
Yes, Sean, I see that.
Actually, Haynes, you know what? I think what was testified was 3 of the 6 lights would stay on all night. The other 3 would go off an hour after the last employee left the site. And I would modify my motion to approve to include all of Mark's and Patrick's comments.
Including the light waiver.
Including, yes.
Okay, so is there any more board discussion on this?
I second that motion.
Okay. My cheat sheet for running the meeting states that the chairman repeats the motion. I'm not going to do that. Okay.
Thank you very much. So Chicky, we got the second, so I think we're ready, Frank.
Okay.
Roll call.
I think roll call, please.
Mr. Valchak?
Yes.
Ms. Erickson? Yes. Mr. Stamler?
Yes.
Haynes?
Yes.
Ms. Lilly?
Yes.
Mr. Walmacher?
Yes.
Mr. Herbert?
Yes.
Okay.
Application has been approved. Congratulations and welcome to Hillsborough. Okay. I'm going to...
Mr. Chairman, next up on board.
Okay. And I'm gonna ask, we're gonna try to get this resolution available by our next meeting to vote on. Is that right, Patrick and Mark?
I am certainly going to endeavor to do that, Mr. Chairman. I have noted, I've had some conversations with Mr. Gorman about this. We have only a transcript of the first meeting so far, and we have already created a summary of the, frankly, limited testimony from that meeting. We don't have a transcript for the second meeting, and obviously we couldn't have a transcript for tonight. So I will work as hard as I possibly can, but this is a D variance, and we do really need the transcripts to put together a complete resolution.
Okay. Very good. We go from here. Patrick, okay, so now that the K9 is finished, Patrick, do you want to get back to talking to Mr. Ford about the July meeting?
Yeah, Mr.
You know
Ford?
what?
I'm sorry,
can I interrupt a moment, Haynes? Why don't we, let's start and maybe hopefully finish, PSE&G tonight, and I don't know how we can plan July until we know exactly what we've got, that we have to plan for.
Sure thing.
It's John. I agree with Chicky because this application for PSE&G looks pretty good and clean. So we might be able to get that done tonight.
Sure thing. I was just asking, respectfully requesting that because Mr. Ford is part of that Bill 2 application, and I was trying to get in touch earlier with their attorney, and I could not. I was just trying to cut to the chase. I wouldn't keep Mr. Ford on the line for another hour or so.
I'm not ready to commit to another July meeting until we see whether or not we can finish up P&G tonight.
Ms. Haynes, I'm not asking for a commitment at this time. I was just, if Mr. Ford can provide a little bit more insight, and that's all I need at the moment.
Well, wait a minute. Insight for what? Tonight's application or a future application? Because I'm not going to discuss any future application. I want to get PSE&G started right away.
It's your meeting. You can conduct it the way you wish to.
Sure. I would just have one question for Mr. Ford, since he's the star witness. I take it there's no substitute available for him at that meeting.
We can continue to PSE&G if Mr. Ford's not available.
Okay. Mr. Ford, you still on the line, or is he gone? Okay, fine. Okay, so let's start with the PSE&G application.
Is Mr. Yarrow here?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Gorman, Mr. Euro is available for the PSE&G meeting.
Sure. Let the record show that 858, Mr. Euro from TN Associates, our board engineer, has joined the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, Patrick, would you please introduce the the application team?
I'll do this quickly for you. Next application is PSE&G, file number BA 19-23, located at Block 1, Lot 2, otherwise known as 433 Bridges Road. Applicant is seeking a D1 and D6 variances, other such variances, waivers, and approvals as required for electrical transmission right-of-way easement to remove two existing transmission line towers and install a new Y-frame and a new H-frame tower and overhead transmission lines. Property is located in the AG zone, otherwise known as the agricultural district. Time of decision is July 3rd, 2020. All yours, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Attorney for PSE&G, please.
Good evening, Chairman and members of the board. My name is Jennifer Carrillo-Perez, with Connell Foley, representing PSE&G on this application.
Good evening.
Good evening. As indicated, I'm sorry?
Go ahead.
Okay. The applicant has filed the application before the board for preliminary final site plan approval as well as variance relief. We intend to call 3 witnesses concerning this application this evening. Joseph D. Bartolomeo, project manager, John Wang, project engineer, and Kathy Herring as our professional planner. Just like to state for the record that we did submit the notice to the township with respect to the notice of property owners and the publication of this hearing. And we are also in receipt of the 3 reports from the township, the memorandum dated June 11th from the engineer, the planning memorandum from Mr. Gorman dated June 9th, and the Environmental Commission meeting memo dated June 7th. And with that said, I'd like to ask Mr. Di Bartolomeo to be qualified. I'd like him to come forward, in air quotes, to be qualified as a witness, and just like to state that he will only be presented as a fact witness and providing fact testimony regarding the work overview and the logistics of this project.
Okay, we'll need to swear him in. Tina, please.
Yes. Sir, can you raise your right hand, please? Is your hand raised? Solemnly swear testimony about okay. Do you solemnly swear testimony about this evening will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And state your name and spell it for the record.
Yes, my name is Joseph Di Bartolomeo, C-I-B-A-R-T-O-L-O-M-E-O.
Okay. Great, thank you. Mr. Di Bartolomeo, by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am currently employed by PSE&G, and I function as a project manager.
And how long have you been employed with PSE&G?
I've been with PSE&G for over 5 years now.
And your duties and responsibilities as project manager, if you can explain that briefly.
Yes, I manage the schedule and costs associated with the current project, as well as oversee all of the departments involved in operations of the project.
And if you can, please explain to the board how the need for this project was determined and what this project entails.
Yes, PSE&G, pursuant to PSE&G's local FERC Form 715 planning criteria, determined that the Roseland Pleasant Valley, which I'll call RPV, facilities had reached their end of life based on the following findings. The facilities are over 90 years old on average. 25% of the structures require extensive foundation rehabilitation or replacement. 54% of the tower structures exceed tower load carrying design capability, and over 85% of the towers are at 95 to 100% of their capability. Significant deterioration of tower legs, gusset plates, and angles due to corrosion was found, and greater than 50% thickness loss of steel members, resulting in further compromise of the load carrying capabilities of the towers were observed. PSE&G identified and reviewed with PJM, our regional transmission operator, and stakeholders through the Transmission Expansion Advisory Committee and sub-regional RTEP committees to receive approval for this project.
Great. And with respect to this particular application, can you just describe what we're seeking to do here?
We are seeking to replace our existing facilities that have reached their end of useful life by replacing the existing lattice towers with a Y-frame monopole and an H-frame monopole to replace the existing transmission line.
And so that is a one-for-one replacement, is that correct?
That is correct.
And can you describe what is intended for that RPV transmission project?
RPV is a linear project split into 2 segments within PSE&G's right-of-way. Segment 1 is from Roseland to Branchburg, and Segment 2 is from Branchburg to Pleasant Valley. Hillsborough Township is included in Segment 2. The 2 segments of this project run approximately 52 miles, with 0.3 miles running through Hillsborough. PSE&G is proposing to replace the existing 230 kV transmission line in kind. The Y-frame monopoles and H-frames will go back into service at 230 kV, but will be built to PSE&G standards PSE&G also proposes to remove the two existing lattice towers, and as mentioned, replace one of them with a Y-frame and one of them with an H-frame within the existing right-of-way. The replacement of the towers will not impact existing traffic or drainage and will not create noise or lighting issues. The project will not violate the township's performance standards in that there will be no discharge of smoke, fumes, gas, dust, odor, or pollutants or waste materials into the air. Further, the project will not produce additional glare or vibration. The monopole structures will be visible to residents, but they will have a more slender, compact profile. Removal of the existing towers allows for consolidation of the mass and footprint of the existing transmission towers.
Okay, great, thank you. And so with that, we understand that it's going to be removal of two and replacement with two, correct?
That is correct.
And can you just describe where Hillsborough falls in that phasing that you just explained?
Yes, so Hillsborough is in the segment 2 portion of the RTV project, which is the southern portion from Branchburg to Pleasant Valley.
And just for the board's kind of information, can you go through quickly the construction sequencing and timing that's expected for this project?
Yes, I can. Hillsborough being part of segment 2, it is in the first phase of segment 2. So we have already completed our geotechnical investigation. We are anticipating start of the civil construction, which includes the access road and foundation installation, late summer of 2020, this year. Our electrical construction, which will include removal of the existing wires, demolition of the existing towers, installation of the new towers, and installation of the new conductors to begin late summer, early fall of this year. The electric construction will be is anticipated to be complete in spring of 2021, and then road restoration, which means removing all our access roads and matting pads and putting it back to its original condition, will follow in spring of 2021 with completion anticipated of winter of 2021, late winter of 2021. The overall completion of the project is winter of 2023, and that is the completion of all 52 miles of the RTV project. With respect to the particular construction activities that you will see on the right-of-way, at this point, the next step would be to see the access road installation, which throughout the project is a combination of matting and stone roads. Following that, crews will excavate and complete foundation installation, which includes foot dewatering. They set the cage, pour the concrete, and then we have it set for a prescribed engineering amount of time. Prior to installing the new towers, the existing conductors removed and the existing structure is removed and out of the way. Once that is clear, we will go ahead and install the new structures and then run the new conductors. For any questions regarding the removal of the existing foundation, our typical removal is 6 inches below grade, unless we're in farmland, in which case we will remove the foundations to 3 feet below grade to make accommodations for farm equipment.
And you had stated that this is on the right-of-way, so you just confirmed that all of the PSE&G activity on the site will be limited to that right-of-way. Is that correct?
That is correct. PSE&G does not require any new property outside of the right-of-way, and all of our access and construction pads are designed to fit within the current existing right-of-way.
Great. I do not have any additional questions from Mr. Bartolomeo.
Okay, are there any questions from members of the board? Hearing none. Any questions from Mark?
Mr. Chairman, this is more of a curiosity than anything else, but perhaps the board would like to know. Do I understand correctly that the lines that are being replaced will actually be out of service completely for some period of time? In other words, the old lines will be taken down before the new towers are put up and then new lines put up?
Yeah, this is Joe DiBartolomeo. That is correct. We have to completely de-energize the lines for safety prior to taking them down, and they will be removed until the new wires go up. If the question is a concern of reliability, PSE&G, as well as our other transmission partners in the area, such as JCP&L, we do not plan for any interruptions of service to anyone in the area. We ensure that we have continued service and reliability.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Bob Euro, TNM. A question from Mr. DiBartolomeo. You indicated access to your towers are going to be via your right-of-way. Looking at the plans that were submitted, there are a series of trails or access roads that seem to be deep into the properties. Are you going to follow those existing trails, or are you going to come directly off of Three Brooks Road to the shortest point of access?
Yes, our engineer will go into more detail, but currently our plans to come off of Three Bridges Road with our construction entrance.
Okay.
And existing farm roads with the road.
It could go through an adjoining neighbor's piece of property to get more direct access, I'm assuming.
It has, generally speaking, PSE&G, we have a number of limitations, especially farmland preserve. So we cannot arbitrarily just use neighboring properties. We have to make sure we go through all the proper government agencies, and our evaluation and conversations through Hillsborough has led us to coming off of Three Bridges being the most direct route without any agency issues.
Okay, thank you.
Patrick, any questions?
No questions at this time.
Okay, well, we'll open it up for questions from the public. Freddie, would you open the line, please?
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, so are there any questions from members of the public for this witness?
Yes, I have a question. Hello?
Yes, could you please state your name and address, please?
My name is Arlene McPherson, and I live at 4016 Three Bridges Road in Hillsborough. And my property is adjacent to these towers. And the PSE&G right-of-way goes through my property. And I want to know if there's a reason that they are going to need to be taking their construction equipment through my property.
Question. I'm sorry, could you repeat that address?
416 Three Bridges Road.
Okay.
Block 1, Lot 3.
Yes, I can see it on the site plans that we submitted. So we are trying to hug the western portion of that property, but unfortunately, just due to the limitations of truck radius turning into there, we are having to use that portion of our easement, which is going to clip part of your property as shown on the site plan. And that is, like I said, that's the issue.
I'm sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing you. Did you say you are going to go over our property?
Yes, we are. Yes, and that would be to the access having to be wide enough to accommodate the truck traffic making radial turns into that property and out of that portion of the right of way through our easement.
And Mr. DiBartolomeo, this is just clarifying, but that is using an existing easement, is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes, but there's plenty of right-of-way space in the field next to us without having to go over our property. It's a wide field, big area. You have a big right-of-way. Why do you have to destroy someone else's property? It's not necessary.
If I may, Mr. Ptolemayo, I'm just going to clarify. We had indicated previously in your testimony that there are restrictions with respect to going over farmland that's preserved. Isn't that correct?
That is correct.
And so PSC&G would be unable legally to utilize farmland preserved property as an access way. Is that not correct?
That is correct. Unfortunately, the additional property that is shown is not actually part of this right-of-way.
Okay, so okay. I wish I had known, so we didn't plant our garden. Were we going to get notice that you're going to go over our property?
Yes, you will. Yes, we have an outreach team that will notice when and when we'll get on there. But additionally, we have an enforcement team that has reached out to you, and we will work with you to discuss that farmland. We have your information, so I'll make sure I pass it along to our outreach team, and we will have conversations. We do have limitations based on just the encroachment policy enforced on us by the national and federal regulations, but we do what we can to accommodate homeowners when possible.
Okay, I have to tell you that we have a septic system that is that right of way, and your heavy equipment would probably destroy that.
We, before we put any roads down, we actually do GPR, which is ground penetrating radar. So we make sure that we find what's below the ground. If you do have current maps that you like to share with us, we would be more than willing to take a look at it and make sure we provide the proper protection not to damage anything in your property. PSC&G does have a policy that if anything is ever damaged by PSC&G, that we make sure we use the right.
Okay, so you said someone is going to reach out to us in advance to discuss this?
Yes, I'll have them reach out to you tomorrow.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Hi, it's Sean Stamler with a question. So with that easement and the resident's property, if there's any damage or when you're done and through with the towers, you repair that land and with grass and so forth and match the original landscape?
Yes, this is Joe again. Absolutely. Part of our restoration plan is to put everything back the way we found it. We take detailed videography and photos of our entire right-of-way before construction because we hold our contractors to making sure everything goes back the way it was. So whether it's farmland, we make sure that the topsoil is put down properly again, it's removed, and if it's a manicured backyard, we make sure that it's properly reseeded.
That's great. And if there's any damage to that residence, septic tank and so forth, PSC&G, I know, if they're good standing, you probably repair and fix, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. We have to partner with these residents for, the duration that we're going to have this right away here, which hopefully is another 100+ years. So we want to make sure we're good neighbors.
Yep, thank you very much.
If I may, for the resident at 416, she received notice of the hearing. This is Jennifer Clovis, the attorney to the board. Please just reach out to me tomorrow because I'm unable to get your information for us to personally reach out to you beyond the address. And I'm happy to connect you with our outreach team so you can have that discussion tomorrow.
Sorry, I'm still having a lot of trouble understanding and hearing. Did you tell me to call you tomorrow?
Well, we don't have your number, so I would like to, my number and contact information is on the notice, or we can coordinate through Hillsborough to help connect us so that we can exchange information, like your telephone number, so we can have those conversations.
Okay. All right. And your name is?
Yes. I'm returning the letter from Jennifer. Yes, correct.
Right. Okay.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, this is Frank. Okay, somebody has to mute their phone. I could hear some talking in the background. Okay, any other members of questions from members of the public for this witness? Okay, hearing none, Fred, would you?
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay. Next witness.
Great. I'd like to call Mr. John Wang. He will be providing testimony as engineer.
Okay.
All right, good evening.
You need to be sworn in. Tina, would you swear him in, please?
Yeah, thank you. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, last name is W-A-N-G?
Correct.
Okay. Go ahead, witness to be sworn.
Great. Mr. Wang, can you just please state for the record your full name and your business address?
Good evening. My name is John Wang. My business address is 4000 Hallie Road, South Plainfield, New Jersey.
And by whom are you currently employed?
I have been employed by PSG since 2015.
And your current title and the nature of your employment?
My current job title is the engineering manager, and I manage the transmission engineering group to ensure the system design complies with the regulatory requirements, as well as the company practice. So I'm responsible for the technical design of the transmission line for this project.
Great. And can you provide the board with your brief description of your educational background and your professional background?
Sure. I graduated from the Stevens Institute of Technology in 2003 with a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and as well as a master's degree in engineering management. So as mentioned, I have employed at PSG for the past 5 years performing engineering and design work. Prior to that, I worked as an engineering consultant performing similar design work for utility companies throughout the country for the past 17 years.
So you're a licensed engineer with the state of New Jersey, correct?
Yes.
And your license
Okay,
Yes.
Okay, this is Frank. We can accept this qualification.
I appreciate that. Mr. Wang, can you please, for the board, describe the existing site and, if you can, reference the exhibit that we will be utilizing?
Yeah, so to better explain the existing condition, I'd like to hold a file that the name is BA-19-23 PFENG photo that's existing and proposed. That was included in the site plan application, so this is going to help us as a visual aid here. So I hope everybody are able to open that. So basically, this exhibit shows two pictures here. The top photo demonstrates existing conditions currently on the existing PSG right-of-way. The lattice tower on the right side of the picture is the existing transmission tower, which is going to remain as is. It's not part of this project. This project is to replace the existing tower on the left side, the shorter one, for the aging infrastructure requirement, as Mr. Joe DiBartolomeo mentioned, right? So these towers were originally built in the 1920s, about 90 plus years old. Have been there, going through the wearing and tearing, and aging effects and the deterioration have been found on the towers, as Joe mentioned, and structural integrity has been compromised, and it has reached the end of the useful life and needs replacement for the continuous system reliability.
Great. And as you heard Mr. DiBartolomeo testify, PSG seeks to replace the towers and wiring that's exclusively located within the right-of-way. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So it is the removal of those and the replacement of two towers in those exact locations. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And that also includes the removal of the concrete foundations of the existing towers. Is that correct?
Yes, as Joe or Mr. DiBartolomeo mentioned, right, some of the existing towers are currently supporting on the steel grillage foundation. Some are on the concrete foundation. I think in the Hillsborough, they are all on the steel grillage foundation. So they will be cut below the grade.
Great. And can you, for the board's benefit, just describe briefly the project itself, the tower replacement portion?
Yeah, so, to describe the project, I think we just pulled up that exhibit, with the two photos. And I would like to still use that to talk about existing condition versus new. So basically in Hillsborough, there are two existing towers to be replaced with two new structures, just as shown on the picture under this project. So at the tower 34 over 3, the existing tower height that's out there right now is 103 feet, and then the new structure is going to be 133 feet. All right, and also just want to also mention, right, because we do have an existing tower that's going to remain. That tower out there right now is 127. So we talk about a new tower is 133 versus 127. It's really hard to tell, there's a couple, feet of difference right there. So at another tower location, 34 over 4, the existing structure is 80 feet, but the new structure for this one is going to be 123. And if we look also the adjacent existing structure that's side by side, that structure is about 110, right? So the height increase on this transmission structure is primarily as a result of meeting the latest code requirements and also the current PSE&G practice, right? So many things have changed since 1920s, right? So, however, you do want to point out, the point like Joe mentioned before, the structure that going in, and the line will be rebuilt, and this project will be operated still at the same voltage, same current level, just as the way they are out there now, right? And the new white frame structure or 8-frame structure, supports the wire, in the flat configuration. So that's our effort that we're trying to minimize the height, as much as technically possible. And all the new structure will be supporting on the concrete K-top foundation within the existing PSE&G right away. So the new structures that you see on the bottom of that picture, like the white shape, that's really a modern, a slim design, and it occupies a much less footprint than the existing. So, as an engineer, in my opinion, it is a modern design, as mentioned, is less invasive than the existing towers that's out there right now.
Okay, great. And the transmission line will also be replaced. Is that correct? You provided some testimony with respect to that?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The transmission line replacement, that'll also be done. You have provided some initial figures.
Yeah, basically, like Joe talked about, we're going to go in there, we're going to take the wire down, existing structure, then the new structure is going up, and the new wire is going to be pulled in as part of the rebuild effort.
And with respect, addressing something that came up earlier, can you please provide testimony with respect to site access and circulation?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay.
Right. So I think the question was asked previously how we access. I think the best way to explain that is to look at the site plan publication was the maps, right? So if I would like to use the drawing that was included in the site plan application. The name is called BA-19-23 PSE&G proposed transmission pole line drawings, right? So I'll give a moment for the opening.
Mark Anderson, engineer. We have exhibits which have not really been identified properly. The first exhibit, I was going to wait, but since you're interested, the second exhibit, I would suggest we mark the first one A1 and the second one A2, if that's acceptable to Ms. Perez.
Sure. The first document that was referenced by Mr. Wang, A1, is entitled Existing and Proposed PSE&G photo. And the one that will be utilized that we're referencing to now, marking that as A2, would be PSE&G proposed transmission pole line drawing.
Thank you.
All right, so I hope everybody has this open. Basically, if you look at the sheet number 3 on the drawing, and if you zoom in all the way to the right side of the drawing, you see that's where the 3-bridge road. That's the existing public road right there. And you can see the red line that demonstrates that currently our PSE right-of-way easement. So on the upper, there's the 3 red lines there, right? So the upper 2 red lines, that's the right-of-way for the existing line that I mentioned before on the right side of the picture, which is not part of the project, right? So for the bottom 2 red lines, the middle and the bottom line, that's the right-of-way we're talking about. That's the power line that we're talking about for this project. And if you zoom in right there, you can see that, off the 3-bridge road, that's where we jump on our existing right-of-way. And, with the stabilized entrance there, then we move to the tower 34/3-1. All right, and that little the dash square box, that's a defined work pad that was mapped out, which means our construction activities, equipment, all the work is just going to be done within that area, that work pad, right? So that if you keep going towards the drawing, to the left, that will take you to the next structure, which is the 34/4-1. It's a similar concept. So basically, we have 2 structures in Hillsborough, and that will be replaced. And all the access to, with all the work associated with the 2 structures will be coming off the 3-bridge road, then jump off on our right-of-way to access those towers. So in general, the construction traffic, will use the access road, shown on the drawing that connects to the public road. And all the construction activity will stay on the PSE right away.
Great. Okay, I appreciate that. Are there any particular questions relative to that issue on site access and speculation? No. If I may, then Mr. Wen, you are in receipt of the engineer's memorandum from the township, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. And if I may just direct you quickly to a point that was raised relative to the impervious coverage for this project.
Right. So there is an impervious. I'm sorry?
I was going to mark it if you reference it yet and identify the document.
All right, so this is a document name for the BA-19-23-PSENG-impervious coverage house.
Right. And I'm going to ask that as well to be marked as A3, as noted by Mr. Wang with the description. You can proceed, Mr. Wang. Can you please provide the board with an overview of that?
So basically, the impervious areas on this, linear construction is really the permanent, impervious area is our foundations of the structures, right? So, we have a Y frame there, which is supporting on one foundation, and also we have an H frame, which is one structure that has 2 legs, right? 2 legs is on 2 foundations. So if you total, the area of the 3 foundations, it's basically about 460 square feet, which is the minimum.
Perfect. And then with respect, I believe there was one other item. You have provided testimony that all of the work in the site will be accessed through the existing right-of-way and easements that are owned by PSE&G. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And so with respect to item number 11, that was referenced in the engineering report, dated June 11th, it indicates all existing and proposed easements along with meets and bounds to be clearly shown on the plan. The testimony that you provided is that the right-of-way and the easements that exist from PSE&G are the only ones that will be utilized or accessed for this project. Is that correct?
That's correct, just as I explained for the plan.
Correct. And so we're not requesting anything additional that would require any approval from the township. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have the right easement and utilizing our existing right-of-way for this construction activities.
Thank you.
Mr. Wang, this is Mr. Euro, engineer. Real quick, in reference to my letter, are there going to be any impacts to the existing drainage characteristics or grading characteristics that are there today?
There is no grading, site grading, at all. At the two locations on this right of way in Hillsborough, and we're gonna install the temporary access road, and the manning, per our solid ocean sediment control plan, and they are all temporary. Once construction is finished, we will pull them out, and like Joe mentioned, Mr. Joe DiBartolomeo mentioned, everything will be restored to the existing condition or better.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep.
And Mr. Wang, one last follow-up to that. Linear projects are exempt, however, right?
I'm sorry.
Linear projects are exempt from stormwater. Is that correct?
Yeah, linear projects like a transmission line in this nature are exempt from the groundwater, recharge, for the DEC regulation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have no further questions from Mr. Wang.
Okay, are there any questions from members of the board?
Hi, it's John. Just one quick one from Mr. Wang. I think Branchburg, you're replacing some towers in Branchburg, and I think that have already been approved.
This is Ms. Carol Perez. They have not. We have an application pending and are scheduled to be heard by that point.
Okay, I was just curious. Thank you.
Hey, this is Jim Wallmacher. Mr. Wang, you mentioned that the towers had to be higher than the old ones because it was currently code and because it's currently PSE&G practice to make them higher. Is there an engineering reason that you know of why they need to be higher than the old ones?
Yeah, so there's definitely engineering reasons, right? And as part of the effort, being a good neighbor, we obviously understand the sensitivity on this, and we just definitely do everything we can try to minimize the height decrease, right? So the way you look at it is this existing line that was built in 1920, right? And this was before even the National Electrical Safety Code was even around. So, if you consider that line, to today's code or standard, that line out there right now, it does not meet today's code requirements for practice. But it was accepted as a grandfather design because it's an existing installation. So just over the years, the code, like the building code or anything else, just become more and more stringent, and the more, requirements are being put into the code, and they require...
Mr. Wang, Mr. Wang, 1 second, please. There's some more rustling in the background. Can someone respectfully mute their phone, whoever's rustling in the back?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Continue, Mr. Wang.
Yep, sure. So I don't know where I left off, that where you but the existing construction is considered a grandfather design, right? So it does not meet today's code. And so over the years, the code just becomes tougher and tougher, more and more stringent, and it requires more ground clearance. So the line is going to be higher and higher. And basically also PSE&G, we have a standard for our work practice as well to make sure our guys can work on the tower safely, that which means we want to maintain adequate clearance. So, just talking about some of the details about, how we derive the height, and, obviously you want to maintain, a ground clearance for public safety, right? So and on top of that, we're talking about, very long spans of wire that's, between the structures, right? So, it's just simple physics, right? The longer you go, you pull the wires, the gravity is going to pull it down. And plus, we push electrical current through that, right? And it actually heat the conductor up. More heat is the more sag. So if you look at, the physics behind it, and you calculate the sag, on some of the spans, the sag could be as high as 50 feet. So, then on top of that, you have your conductors, and on top of the conductor, you have a shoot wire. So you add all this up, and really the structure just got higher. That's how we build up the height of structures.
You answered my question. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions from members of the board? Any questions from Mark?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I think Bob can finish, right? And Patrick?
I just have one comment on the memorandum, Mr. Chairman. My last page, is there going to be, Mr. Wang, is there going to be a temporary storage area on site?
So we have a staging area, and for the project, so the materials, they're going to be stored at the staging area, but, during construction, they will be brought on site, for, when they need it for the structure erection. But all this work, and like I mentioned before, no matter it's the foundational work or it's the steel erection work or the wire work, they all going to be, complete on the PSCG right away.
Sure thing.
Mr. Wang, I think, if I may just clarify the question. Mr. Wang, the question I think pertains to the storage of materials. Is it correct that PSCG will be storing the materials? The staging site will be located outside of Hillsborough, is that correct?
That's correct.
So there will be no staging site within the township of Hillsborough. Everything will be brought in, correct, and everything will be brought in through the easement and the access roads within the right-of-way, is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, so nothing will be stored on site, but for at the time of construction, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this point, we'll open up questions from the public. Fred, would you open the line, please?
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, so are there any questions for this witness for members of the public? I don't hear any. Fred, you can close the line.
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay, next witness.
Great, thank you. I'd like to call Catherine Herring, our professional planner.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Can everyone hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Okay, so we need to swear you in.
Am I too loud? I'm sorry.
You asked that, are you asked that question often? Okay, we need to swear you in.
I'll swear you in now. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you solemnly swear testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, state your name and spell for the record.
My name is Catherine Herring, K-A-T-H-E-R-I-N-E. Herring is H-E-R-I-N-G.
Hi, I'm ready.
Great. And Ms. Herring, can you please provide the board with your, by whom you are employed, and how long have you been employed in that capacity?
Sure. I'll start with my business address and place of employment. I am currently employed at D.W. Smith Associates, located at 1450 Route 34 in Wall Township. I've been employed there for over 5 years as a senior project engineer and program manager of our permitting group. With respect to my educational background, I have earned my bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Duke University and my master's degree with honors at James Civil Engineering with a concentration in construction management from Georgia Tech. I've been a licensed professional engineer in New Jersey for 19 years. also licensed professional planner for 17 years. I am a certified municipal engineer for 16 years, and for 3 semesters I was an adjunct professor at Rutgers University. Prior to working at D.W. Smith Associates, I worked as a municipal engineer for 14 years, where I performed the duties of a municipal engineer and a board engineer in multiple municipalities in the state.
Okay, and correct. And you will be providing testimony as a professional planner, correct?
Yes, I will. And I have provided testimony on behalf of PSC&G on several transmission projects in the state of New Jersey.
Great, thank you. I'd like to
Yes, we can accept the qualifications.
Great.
We can accept the qualifications.
Thank you. Ms. Herring, can you please provide the board with what your role has been with this application and the analysis with respect to the relief that's being sought?
Yes. As part of our responsibilities, I have reviewed the township zoning ordinance and master plan to identify compliance with the requirements and identify any variances or waivers that may be required as part of the site plan. I also have reviewed the board professional letters that were previously mentioned at the beginning of the hearing. As previously stated, our application requires 2 variances. First is a D1 variance for the use of the towers and the lines to be located in the AG agricultural zone, where the major utility use facility is not permitted. And secondly, a D6 height variance is required, where 60 feet is the maximum permitted height, and testifies the 2 heights. The height of the wide frame monopole will be 123 feet, and the H-frame structure will be 133 feet. I'll refer back to the board planner's letter with respect to the use standards and the bulk standards and the need to provide the special reasons in support of the D1 variant. This particular project, as a public utility, is considered by the courts to be an inherently beneficial use. And to be considered an inherently beneficial use, a use must be universally considered of essential value to the community because it fundamentally serves the public good and promotes the general welfare, which are goals of the municipal land use law and also of the township's master plan. An inherently beneficial use is one that is presumptively satisfies the positive criteria for the granting of a use variance because just by its very nature is deemed to be inherently beneficial to the public good. Just in overall, the supply of electric power is considered to be an inherently beneficial use to the public, and also providing the greater reliability in the electrical grid through necessary replacements of the transmission lines and the towers that service local and regional emergency services, in addition to the businesses and the residential uses, is essential in order to advance the public health, safety, and welfare. The legal standard of proof when seeking a D1 variance for an inherently beneficial use is set forth in the case of Speaker versus the Wall Township Zoning Board of Adjustment. In this case, established a 4-part balancing test that the board must undertake to determine whether or not a D-use variance should be granted. I'll quickly run through these steps, the first of which is to identify the public interest that is at stake. The second is to identify any detriments associated with the proposal. The third would be to determine whether the imposition of any reasonable conditions would reduce those impacts if possible. And lastly, the board should weigh the positive and negative aspects of the project and make a determination whether the variance should be granted. So with respect to the public interest, these towers, as you heard from Mr. D. Bartolomeo, this application is the first segment of a two-segment linear project. These poles were installed back in the 1920s and have reached the end of their useful life. These structures, and will be slightly presumptuous, predate all of us, since they're sight unseen at this point, and it also predates the Townships land use ordinance. These are close to 90 years old, and they just at this point have, as Joe had mentioned, have just reached the end of their useful life and need to be replaced. And the ability to provide reliable electrical service not only to the residents and the business owners, but to the emergency responders is absolutely essential to the health and safety and welfare of the public. And without these services, like the hospitals and schools, would not be able to function, and they would place the health and safety of occupants at serious risk. So, in my opinion, this replacement project definitely ranks high on the scale of public interest. With respect to the detrimental impacts, which is step 2 caused by the project, the main detrimental impact, which may be subjective, would be the visual impact. However, we're taking these old antiquated lattice towers that occupy a much larger footprint and airspace, and consolidating it into a more slender monopole or H-frame structure. So visually, one may see it as a detriment, but some may also see it as a benefit, in that it does have a slendering and consolidating result of the bulk and mass of the lattice towers that are out there now. Step 3 for the SECA test would be to determine whether or not any conditions could be implemented, which would mitigate any of these impacts, which would be visual. And then lastly, the board would determine whether or not the benefits outweigh any of the detriments. In my opinion, this is an inappropriate use of the property. It has been used as an electrical right-of-way for over 90 years. It's been in the background of the Hillsborough community, obviously, for decades, and it would be practically infeasible for this project to be located elsewhere than the existing right-of-way that exists.
So, would it be fair to say that, based on, in your opinion, the project satisfies all of that legal criteria, right, enabling the board to proceed and grant the approval as requested?
It is my opinion, yes. And I also, and just to reference the Townships Master Plan, the 2018 reexamination report does acknowledge that the utility plan element of the master plan has not been updated since 1996. And then referring back to that 1996 master plan, the utility plan element only addresses utilities with respect to water and sanitary sewer service, and remains relatively silent with respect to the right-of-way and the provision of electrical service to the residents and the municipality.
Thank you. I have no further questions from parents.
Any questions from members of the board?
I just have one question, Haynes, Mark, or Frank. One question, when are you due to be heard in Branchburg?
Is that the planners? So that's not a question for the planner. This is Ms. Coyle first. I believe we're scheduled to be heard this month as well.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, July. I apologize, July.
Any other questions from members of the board? Mark, do you have any questions?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Patrick?
Just one question, Mr. Chairman. I heard a lot of, testimony provided for the D1. Mark, do you have enough there for a D6? Because I didn't hear a lot for the D6 variant.
Yes, Mr. Gorman, I think that the planners adequately cover both 1 and the D6.
Okay.
And Bob, do you have any further questions?
Nothing further from Mr. Euro.
Okay. Okay, so we'll open up for questions for the public for this witness. Right?
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay. Are there any questions from members of the public for this witness? Hear none, so Fred, you can close the
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay. Motion to open for public comment.
Motion to open.
Second?
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Hearing none is approved. Fred, would you open the line again for input from the public?
All participants are now in interactive talk mode.
Okay, at this point, we ask for input from the public for comments on this project. Is anybody out there that wants to speak to that?
Yes, this is Arlene McPherson again.
Go ahead.
416 Three Bridges Road. And I make a suggestion that you do not approve their variances, and instead I suggest that Public Service Electric and Gas should apply for a variance so that they can build their access road within their right-of-way, but on the agricultural property, so as not to destroy a resident's property.
What would that involve? Okay, would Public Service like to respond to that?
Sure. This is Jen Clovis. I think we have indicated that we did provide notice. We're happy to reach out to the property owner, but respectfully, all the work and access will be that will be utilized for this project, as provided by the testimony of the witnesses, will be CSNG easements and right-of-way. And they also have committed to work with the residents to ensure that nothing is disturbed, and if it is, they will work with them to replace it. We have also made a commitment to reach out to them and have this discussion tomorrow. We do believe the application has put forth and the testimony supports the granting of the site plan and the variance release. And again, we are utilizing easements and right-of-ways within CSNC's control, and we'll reach out to ensure that we maintain a good relationship and transparency with the neighbors. We want to work with the property owners in the neighborhood, and so with that, I'll just submit that that is our position, and we'd like to work with you and the community, but we do believe that this is a necessary upgrade that's required to service the state of New Jersey.
Okay, thank you. Any further comments? Okay, I hear none, so Fred, you can...
All participants are now in listen-only mode.
Okay, so would you like to summarize your case?
Yes. I believe, you heard testimony from our project manager, engineer, and our planner. This is an application seeking a use and a height variance that is required for a larger project throughout the state to upgrade outdated towers and provide better service to the residents. I'm going to rely on what was submitted and the testimony provided to this board, and with that, we submit our application and the testimony.
Okay, thank you. At this point, I'll ask for any input from the professional staff. Start with Patrick.
There's just a few comments from the EC. Most of them have to do with following up with outside agency approvals. A few just to mention at the moment is with the Somerset County Soil Conservation, NJDEP, anything with the Fish and Wildlife Service and the FAA, which I believe we have their FAA approval.
Bob Euro?
Nothing from Mr. Euro.
Okay, thank you. And Mark, anything from?
Chairman, I would only comment briefly on the question of using existing rights-of-way and easements for access. I do not think it's within the board's power to restrict PSE&G from using their existing easements rights-of-way.
No, I understand. Okay, so open for board discussion. Any input from the board members for this application?
It's Stamler. I think it's a good application, it's clean, and I motion to approve this application as is.
Okay, do I hear a second?
I would second the motion, and I would just say that, this is something that has to be done. They've had an easement there, they've had the towers there for 90 years, and it certainly is for the public good. They've already offered to help the landowner who has concerns, and I see nothing that's not positive about this application. So I second the motion.
Okay. Roll call, please, Tina.
Yes. Mr. Valchek?
Yes.
Ms. Erickson?
Yes.
Mr. Stamler?
Yes.
Ms. Haynes?
Yes.
Mr. Lilly? Bill? Is Philomena on the line?
I assume she dropped off. I don't hear her.
Okay. Mr. Walmacher?
Yes.
Chairman Herbert?
Yes. Well, we have 6 yes votes, so the application passes. Is approved.
Yep, I think we're good.
Yep. Okay. Finished that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your time. Okay, the last one of business tonight then is to talk about the July meeting. Now we know that we completed these 2 applications tonight, so we know we don't have to carry into July. So, Patrick, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, sure. Sorry to take up a little bit more of the board's time. Earlier this week, we received notice from Mr. Ogrodnik, who is the attorney for the Bill 2 application, aka the golf station on 206. That application was originally scheduled for the July 1st meeting, but the board engineer, Mr. Ford, had a conflict and could not attend and could not make it to that meeting. So Mr. Ogrodnik requested that the board, if the board can conduct a special meeting in July. I don't have a date certain. We can discuss a date. I have dates in front of me that we could possibly use. So it's up to the board what they want to decide to do at this point. I have their time of decision now at 7:30. If we have to extend, then we'll need an additional extension by the applicant.
Patrick, today, are we talking about the 15th, or did they give you a date? Or, what are we looking at?
Yeah, I tried reaching out to Mr. Ogrodnik later today with a little more clarity. I was hoping to get a little more from Mr. Ford tonight, if it was possible. It just says in their notes to July. So to me, if I can't get in touch, we could be pretty open. The dates at all the Wednesdays, I have all the Wednesdays here in July in front of me. If they need notice for the July 8th meeting, they have to be in the paper by June 26th. If they want to do July 15th, they got to be in the paper by July 3rd. If they want to be on for July 22nd, we need to be needed.
Got the idea. Okay.
I want to know, when did you find out about this?
I believe it was earlier this week.
You know, I can't do July, so whatever the board wants to do, it's fine. I can't do July.
I can do the 15th, but we cancel July 1st, okay? We don't, I don't think there's anything else coming up that early, but...
Let me jump in here. This is Frank. Okay, so if we don't have an application on July 1st, we might have two resolutions, right? And I'm going to ask Mark if when we have two resolutions, these two from tonight on July 1st, and these sounded like it may even be difficult, for K9.
Well, so fine. So putting it off 2 weeks it makes it easier to make sure all the resolutions are done. I mean, look, it's not our fault that Bilbo, isn't ready after how many months.
Oh, I know.
That's my point, Vicky. When we're just getting notified now. I can't understand how irresponsible it seems like that application is.
Well,
yeah, and if Mike can't do it, they should be able to have a substitute engineer, for crying out loud.
That's right. Exactly.
Okay, well, my point was that if we don't have an application, what's left? And it sounds like we might have one resolution, Mark, or maybe not even.
Earlier, I will do my best to turn around resolutions, but I think that there's a much greater likelihood that I'll have the transcripts in time to do for the 15th than I would for the 1st, based on my understanding from the reporters.
Guys, if you want a commitment from me, I was going to get started on the transcripts on Monday, so you would have them next week. That's what I told Jennifer at the office. Mark.
Well, yeah, but I don't want to have a meeting July 1st just to approve resolutions.
No, that's not good.
Yeah, it'd be a special meeting, and it'd be paid for by the applicant at that point, because they're requesting a special meeting at this point.
And Patrick, they didn't even give us a date. We might say the 15th, and they might say, well, no, we just said July. We can't make the 15th.
I don't know what to tell you.
You know what I mean, Chicky? They didn't even say, they just said July. We might say 15th is good, and they might come back saying that is not good for them. And I don't want to be pushed around like this.
Can I suggest July 32nd?
Who was that?
But the thing is, though, I know it's a little frustrating, especially from my end, from trying to get all of this together, and especially under the circumstances during the pandemic, to be in touch with all of you and to have this not ready. And I apologize if it's not clearly communicated.
You're fine, Patrick. You're fine. Do me a favor, Patrick. Why don't you verify with them that the 15th is fine, but tell them that's not definite, that you'll have to get back to the board members to see if we can all attend.
Well, that's
we got to do it tonight, don't we, Mark?
The special meeting can be, under the bylaws, does not have to be established at a meeting. It would certainly be desirable, and in particular because I quickly looked at the application, it does include a D variance, which means minimum of 5 affirmative votes to approve, and most applicants are not willing to take votes without at least 7 members full 7 members present.
And we've been having trouble with some members attending these meetings, so we got an issue with 2 particular members, right?
Yeah, no, we had both.
I hear one person say that he was not available.
Okay, let me do this. This is Frank, okay? Let's just take a roll call vote on the 8th, another one for the 15th, and who can be available, so this way Patrick knows how many members he would have on each day.
I mean, Mark, I think I can do that administratively through the office if we don't have to.
I mean, technically under the bylaws, the chairman has to call it, but it's fine. Yes, it does not have to be established today. I'm only recommending what the chairman has suggested. Find out who's available, because I don't think it really helps much if you schedule a meeting and you've got only 4 or 5 or 6 members, and then the applicant doesn't want to take a vote anyway.
Okay.
And Frank, you can't give them every Wednesday in July. Come on now, you're not having any due respect for your board members here.
So what dates would you give, John?
I would say even Mark said the same thing. You know, we got to find out what the applicant's availability is too, but also send out an email to all the board members and see what Wednesdays were available.
Yeah, and forget the 8th for me anyway.
That's what I mean. If we schedule something, the applicant might not like it. And they just said July, so, you know, we can't just put something down and it might not happen again.
And you know what? It's almost inconsiderate of the applicant to suddenly say they can't make a date that has been on the books for several months and not give us a suggested alternate date. So you know what? Let's not even try to go any further with that tonight. Patrick, if you can handle it administratively, you and Frank, let's do it that way.
I'll work with Mark, Frank, Mr. Organic, and we'll get something together. Of course, news will be out, but this might work out a little bit in the long run, as then we might get the resolutions all together at that point. So that way we'll have something worthwhile at the next meeting where we're approving resolutions at that point, and, you know, going forward that we're looking good at that point. That's all I can offer.
And I'll do my best to attend the meeting in July. I'll come back to my religious retreat where I'm baking bread for the friars and all that.
Frank, I make a motion to adjourn.
Wait, before we go there,
Can I just add this? Can I just add something? Because are we ever getting back to where there's going to be a proposal where we're actually back at the municipal building in person, doing these meetings? I mean, listening to these on the phone for 3 hours is a little tough. And if we're going to have the golf one is any sort of a complicated application, I'd almost wish that we could put them off as much as we can so that we could potentially do this in person in the municipal building at that point.
Hey, Tina.
That would be great.
This is Fred.
Fred.
I'm all for that. There has been some opposition here at the municipal building from certain people, but in general, I think that is based on the governor's orders. There is certainly, we can have 50 people in the municipal building, so I would highly recommend this board comes into the administrator here at the municipal building and tells them that you would want to have a meeting on site, because you can certainly socially distance your 6 or 7 committee members and 1 board secretary. We could probably fit up to 50 or 60 people in this courtroom following the appointed court orders from the governor as we speak. So I pray that all of you, this is just a suggestion from Fred, the IT guy, to do that to the administrator here and say, hey, there's no reason we can't come into this building, get our temperature taken, fill out a form like we all do today here anyway, and sit here and have a meeting.
Yeah, this is good. I'll amend it that way. And I'll reach out absolutely tomorrow. We have to wear a mask though?
You have to, this is Fred, our instructions here in the building are if you're walking through common areas to wear a mask. So I think what they will tell you is to wear a mask coming into the building, and once you're seated in the courtroom in your position, which will be 6 feet away from somebody, you can remove your mask. And that's what the committee members have been doing at their meetings that they're holding here in the courtroom. It's what Patrick and I do here in the courtroom. We are socially distanced, and we're not wearing masks. So, please, every one of you, please call them and tell them that's what you'd like to do, because it'll help everybody out.
We got I'm on it, because, and you know what, by the end of July, you know, if we push this off even more, you don't know that Murphy isn't gonna change and even expand the amount of people in a building anyway. So, I mean, you don't know what's happening, he changes things so frequently that, you know, if you push it off till the end, later in July, it may not even be an issue, as it really isn't an issue right now. So, I will definitely.
I agree.
Yeah, so.
Oh, you know, you know what I really think? I think you guys just miss seeing me.
Oh, John, you caught us. That's all about you. Mr. Sandler's sitting in the back row. Fred, you got that? I'll put John's seat in the back row there.
Got it.
Okay.
All right.
So, you know,
So
I'll wear a mask, all right?
I'm sorry, so just, I'm sorry, it's Patrick. So just so I'm clear with some direction from the board is to, I'll work with Frank, Mr. Ogrodnik, and Mark in establishing a date to make sure that notices can be out properly. We don't need to vote on this tonight, and that's the best way we can do it at this point.
Okay, but let me add it to that. Something we do have to vote tonight is whether we have going to cancel the July 1st meeting.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, I make a motion, we cancel July 1st.
I second it.
That was Payne.
Okay.
Frank, all in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Hey, Frank, just keep me and Chicky in the loop too with the next meeting and stuff like that. So, but I want to. How many members do we have appearing tonight? Did we have 6 members?
Yes.
We had 7.
Okay, we had 7. All right. Because yeah.
But I think in the future we're just going to be down to 7 maximum. Okay, how things are going.
Okay. I don't know why.
So
I don't know why. Frank, did you ever ask the question? Did you ever ask the question, Frank, why we've been minus the 2 members since like January?
I have no idea.
Okay.
But so I will work with Patrick. I'll get Chicky involved if she wants to be, and we'll work with Ogrodnik and establish the next meeting for the Philco, and then will be the meeting that we have the 2 resolutions for from tonight also.
Yeah, already then.
And you'll probably see a survey or some sort of note from Patrick in the next day.
Yeah, well, I'll have Eva survey the membership to see who's going to be available and to do what we need to do. The Bill 2 application will probably take a whole meeting if we're doing it by teleconference.
All right. I apologize for being in a bad mood tonight.
Oh, no.
Tonight? Just tonight.
That's all right.
I can't put that down.
Well,
put it down. Tonight.
Well, and
make a motion to adjourn, Frank.
Motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Second on.
Have an ordinary night.
Frank, are we voting? All in favor?
Opposed.
Goodbye.
Good night.
Thank you, guys.
thanks, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah.
Bye.
Good night. Mark,